What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was abandoned in the forest and came back controlling nature itself? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. In the middle of a forest, towering above the landscape, tails thrashing, knocking away random ninja was the fearsome Kyuubi no Kitsune. Jaws thrashing, it proceeded to consume a dozen shinobi. A squad of 4 black-clad Enbu rushed the huge manifestation, one blasting fire, another had pulled a large sword from his back, the third was sitting on a massive boar. The last, who was hidden by a dog mask, charged behind the others, lightning covering his right hand. The Kyuubi's massive eyes, bigger than a small pond, flicked downward, it flared its nostrils slightly, and one of its tails snapped down and connected with the fire-shooting ninja. Then a claw lashed out and slashed the sword-carrying shinobi in half, sword included. Its massive jaws snapped down and consumed the bear, and the warrior riding it, whole. The Kyuubi roared, an unholy roar that seemed to shake the earth where it stood. The massive eyes glanced to the dog Anbu, and then looked to the sky. Lightning flashed down and struck the electricity-covered hand. The lightning froze, only for a split second. Then what appeared to be half of the bolt shot off in another direction. A low growl echoed from the creature's throat and it swatted the ninja away with the back of its paw. A sudden rush of air and Kyuubi whipped around to see the Toad Lord, Gamabunta, with a blonde-haired man standing on his head. For the first time that night it opened its jaws and, in the language of men, spoke. Gamabunta. It came out as a huge rumbling roar, even though the Kyuubi had meant it to be casual. Kyuubi, why are you attacking my village? The massive toad shouted, as many shinobi ducked and covered their ears at the sound of the massive giant's voices. Toad Lord, you know I only eat once every 100 years. This village is going to be my next meal, move aside, the fox said calmly. Though only the toad heard this because all others on the battlefield had plugged their ears. We don't have a chance, do we? The blonde-haired man on the top of his summon asked. Gamabunta shook his head. He sighed, then I'll have to use it then. The fourth was remarkably calm, knowing he would be sealed for eternity. He formed the seals and whispered the name. Sealing. Death God contract, yes. I know this isn't the canon technique, but it's there for a reason. He glanced over his shoulder as the form of the Lord of Death itself materialized behind him, holding an outline of a man remarkably similar to the Hokage. The figure's hand reached into the white robe that covered it, and retrieved an oil lamp. Think Tonberry lamp from FF. The lamp glowed a blue, ethereal light, and the blonde man felt a tug on his soul. The Kyuubi obviously felt a tug too, because it flew into a rage, and leaped at the summon, jaws open to bite, and claws ready to rend. It drew within several hundred meters of the toad, when it stopped mid-leap. The figure began to emit an odd series of clicks and hums, most too high or low for human ears. Light lanced from the lamp, striking the fox and the man. The man went willingly with the light, while the 9 tails thrashed and pulled against the unseen force, but it was in vain. The death god outranked any greater demon lord, and the Kyuubi's entire body was pulled into the lamp, while the blue outline held by the death lord was absorbed, and the man dropped dead, a smile on his face. Several miles away, a squealing cry erupted as a blue glow struck a small infant boy, with seals painted on his stomach. The light flashed red for a moment, but then ceased altogether. The cries grew louder, until a gentle old man picked up the child and placed him in a crib. The baby immediately fell asleep. Naruto was the only word uttered by the third as he exited. 7 years after the Kyuubi attack. At the age of 7, Naruto Uzumaki was many things. A notorious prankster, a citizen of the village hidden in the leaves, and currently the target of a mob of very angry, very drunk villagers, and mostly sober shinobi. Said target was currently running like hell, to get away from said mob. Unfortunately for Naruto, a 7-year-old's legs can only move so fast, and with trained ninja in the mob, not matter how intoxicated, he wasn't fast enough. One shinobi appeared in front of Naruto, and landed a gut-wrenching knee to his stomach. Lame pun intended, sending him back toward the mob, who proceeded to abuse him in every way they could think of. One stuck knives through his hands to keep him from getting up, another stuck a pitchfork through his thigh. This continued until a dove-masked Anbu showed up, He or she gestured to Naruto and said, "Hold him down." Two people broke from the mob and approached Naruto. One grabbed one of his arms and one of his leg while the other did the same. The Anbu approached and produced a syringe from a hidden pocket. "This is for my family demon," she spat. The others in the mob recognized the voice as female. She proceeded to jab the needle in Naruto's arm as painful as possible, and slammed her hand down on the end. Naruto thrashed as the substance took effect. Again, unfortunately for Naruto, the healing provided by the Kyuubi worked against him here. He had been injected with a corrosive substance that eats away at one's organs. So as his organs were destroyed, only to reform, then be destroyed again. Young Naruto was already screaming from the torture he had already been put through. Now, he simply blacked out away from the pain. The civilians saw this and decided the demon brat had been beaten enough for the day, and they would pick up tomorrow, as most weren't willing to stain their hands with blood, even if in their opinion it was demon blood. Only a dozen out of the 30 or so shinobi stayed around Naruto. Most of these were clan member, who had lost many members in the Kyuubi attack. One, obviously the leader, ordered the others to pick him up and gestured for them to follow. They exited Konoha and proceeded some miles away before reaching a cliff. The leader spoke again. "Stand him up." Two of the others held Naruto up by his arms. His eyes fluttered open slightly, signaling that he was awake, if only slightly. "So demon, this is where you die," the leader said. Naruto got a brief look at him, but his face was obscured by a white mask. The man stepped forward and delivered a kick that propelled Naruto straight off the cliff behind him. Naruto spoke one word as he started to fall. "Why?" It was barely whispered, but the leader heard it. "Because, you are demon, and demons should be destroyed like the scum they are." They began to walk away. They turned back, and there was many rude hand gestures and agreements with the demons' punishment. They returned to the village with looks of content on their faces. Back at the cliff, Naruto, on the other hand, hit the bottom of the cliff hard. By this time his healing has expelled the poison, but when he hit the bottom, force he built up in the fall shoot through his body like lightning through a tree. It snapped every major bone, though the ribs around his heart and lungs were miraculously unharmed. It ruptured several minor organs and cracked his skull open. He felt every second of it too, as he had woken up halfway down. Somehow still awake, he began crawling. Every foot felt like an eternity, but he kept moving. Trailing blood, he made it to a cave with light shining from the entrance. He crawled inside, and found a man leaning against a wall. He too was injured, but only mildly, mostly cuts and bruises. The man saw Naruto and ran to him. "What the hell happened to you, kid?" he asked as he pulled out a container of medical salve. Naruto flinched away from the man, but he didn't have the strength to move anymore. "Are you going to hurt me too?" he asked the man. "What reason could I have to hurt you?" the man exclaimed. Naruto passed out as he said this, and the man went to work bandaging his wounds. "Son of a bitch, kid, what happened to you?" he asked himself. "I was planning to use this on myself, since I've only got enough energy to do this once for now, but you need it more than me," he thought. Naruto regained a sense of self and his eyelids fluttered open slightly. Naruto worked up the energy to open his eyes all the way. He gave the man a once-over. He was about 6 foot and fairly lanky. He wore a brown overcoat, but the sleeves were ripped at the elbow. From his elbow down, he wore an air of crystal-like gauntlets. They reflect light similar to a prism. Not that Naruto knew this, he only knew that the rainbow emitted from them calmed his erratic heartbeat. The man contorted his hands in a strange pattern, and the glow from the armwear intensified. It grew into a blinding white flash, and Naruto passed out. The man slumped back onto the cave wall and watched as the wounds on the blonde-haired child began to close. "Damn, that still takes too much out of me," he said as he too passed out. 2 days later, Naruto opened his eyes to find the man grilling fish over a fire. He sat up and looked around. The man turned and looked at him. "So you're finally awake, punk," he said. "My name's Naruto?" Naruto replied meekly. "I'm still going to call you punk, punk," the man countered. Naruto slumped back slightly, so this man was going to call him names like the rest of the villagers. "Anyhow, you've been out a day and a half, so I bet you're hungry," the man said. The growl from Naruto's stomach was all the answer needed. The man handed him a grilled fish and took one for himself. They ate in silence, until the man asked, "How did you get so beat up, punk?" he asked, and Naruto flinched at the word. The people in my village beat me up and then threw me off a cliff. Naruto replied matter-of-factly like it happened to him every day. What? Where you from, kid? The only village I know of around here is the Leaf Village, and they're pretty mellow over there? The man asked, horrified that someone could do this to a child. I'm from the Leaf Village, Naruto answered. Those bastards torturing an innocent child, he growled. I don't think I'm innocent, Naruto said. The villagers called me demon and tell me I killed their families. The man thought for a moment. No way, it's that kid they sealed Kyuubi into, stupid bastards. They don't know what they could have had if they had treated him right. You haven't done anything wrong, kid, he told Naruto. I think a real introductions are in order. I'm Nash, S-class criminal wanted in every nation on the continent, for various crimes, including stealing the cage scrolls of every hidden village, and the killing of 8 platoons of hunter ninja. At different times, of course. And you are? He asked Naruto. Naruto stared at the man, who he now knew as Nash. It's not polite to stare, Nash said, and Naruto started, then regained his bearings and answered the question. I'm Naruto Uzumaki and well. That's all, Naruto said softly. Well, now what do I do with the kid? Can't leave him here and I can't send him back to the village. Guess I could take him to the old bastard, he thought. Hey kid, how would you like to come with me for a while, until you're strong enough to defend yourself? I know someone who could train you, but it won't be easy. Naruto thought for a moment. If I learn how to fight, then the villagers won't be able to hurt me. He thought, okay, I'll go with you and I'll do whatever it takes to get stronger, he said, the absolute determination showing in his eyes. Nash said, all right, let's pack up and head out. You got a long couple of years to go, kid. 2 hours later. Hey, Nash, where are we going? Asked Naruto after several hours of walking. I'm taking you where you need to go, kid, Nash replied. Naruto shut up for 5 minutes, then he began to look around. His eyes landed on Nash, and he began to observe him more closely. I wonder what those weird gauntlet things are, Naruto thought. He voiced this thought aloud, and Nash replied, they're called celestial gauntlets, and they're what kept you alive. Okay, so where did you get them? Naruto asked. I got them from my sensei, who showed me how to make them, and that's where I'm taking you, kid, Nash said back. Naruto continued his train of thought then asked, hey, Nash, why don't you try to hurt me like the villagers? Nash countered with, why should I be hurt, you kid? Naruto replied, because all the villagers say I'm a demon and should be punished. Nash's face grew cold. Bullshit, kid, you aren't any more of a demon than any other person. They lapsed into silence for a few minutes, then Naruto spoke again. Why are you taking me to your master, Nash? Nash asked him, do you want to be a ninja, kid? Naruto replied, you mean like the old man Hokage? Yep, Nash said. Then, yes, I want to be a great ninja so the villagers will stop trying to kill me, Naruto exclaimed. Good, cuz we're here, Nash said as they reached an enormous boulder leaning against a mountainside. Nash began forming hand seals, when Naruto asked, what's that weird thing you're doing with your hands? These are hand seals, kid, they're the ninja's primary way to use techniques, or just you, as the ninja called them. Nash reached the 68th hand seal, and pressed his palm against the boulder. A large section seemed to melt away, and Nash walked into the opening. This is where your master lives? Naruto asked as he followed Nash into the entrance. They walked for a few minutes, then Nash answered, yeah, he likes his privacy. They reach an upward slope, and Nash called, old bastard, you up there? The reply came back, yeah, what do you want, you lazy-ass student? The voice was one that held great power and wisdom, but at the same time made you feel welcome. Nash called back up, I brought a kid with me, old geezer, I wanted to see if you could train him. Hold on a sec, came the answer. Footsteps were heard and a light appeared at the top of the hill. It moved forward until it was a few yards in front of the duo. A man came into view. He was covered in armor that appeared to be made of the same material as Nash's gauntlets, and a sword of the same was strapped to his back. He had an old, but kind face similar to the third's, or so Naruto observed. So this is the Gaki, brat, you want me to train? He asked, gesturing toward Naruto. Yeah, that's him, his name's Uzumaki Naruto, of the village hidden in the leaves. He's special, like that boy we heard about in Suna, or the chick from Kumo. Nash replied, well boy, do you want to be trained in my way of the ninja? The elder man asked Naruto, sure, Oji-san, old man. Both men stared at Naruto for a moment, then the elder burst out laughing and the younger slapped Naruto on the back. "It's been a while since anyone's had the guts to call me that. Boy?" The elder got out. "I like you, kid. But I don't accept slackers, so you have to promise to never give up on my training," the old man said, his face returning to seriousness again. "I promise, sir," Naruto added for good measure. The old man replied, "All right, your training starts tomorrow. My name is Kogastu, by the way, and you're in for one hell of a time." Panting could be heard from deep within a cavern within a mountain hidden by a boulder. Chuckling could also be heard, but from a different source. The former was a worn, sweaty Naruto, who at the moment was on the floor trying to regain his breath. The latter source was Kogastu, who was sitting on a rock looking down on Naruto. "Come on boy, is that all you got?" he shouted from the rock. "I've seen sloths work faster than you." "Screw you, old geezer," Naruto shouted back, stuck his hand out, and repeated a gesture he had seen Nash use several times. He raised his middle finger. Then he proceeded to run at the cave wall. He put one foot on the wall and pushed off with the other. He made it up a few feet and broke into a run straight up the wall and onto the ceiling. He ran down the other wall onto the floor, then up the first wall. "That's good, boy," Kogastu called, "just 18 more laps to go, but if you keep it up and you'll be water walking in a few days." Naruto momentarily lost focus because of the comment. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but since he was on the ceiling at the time it resulted in a very painful fall. Naruto sat rubbing the anime-sized lump on his head, while his instructor laughed in the background. Naruto finally got up. He asked, "Hey, old man, when do I get some of that armor stuff you're wearing?" Kogastu stopped laughing and replied, "When you're ready boy, when you're ready." Kogastu changed subject and said, "Alright, now give me 10 more laps and then you can have a 5-minute break. Then you get to do 500 push-up, 1,000 sit-ups, and 100 chin-ups." He finished as if it was a privilege to be worked to exhaustion. "Damn it," Naruto complained as he set about the exercises. He started running again. He asked, "Hey, when do I start learning cool ninja stuff, old man?" Kogastu replied, "Next year boy. This year we're going to work on your chakra capacity and stamina." Naruto groaned. "A whole year?" His instructor nodded. "Damn," Naruto swore. Kogetsu ignored it. He wasn't much for manners himself, and manners weren't what Naruto was in his home to learn. Next day, Naruto woke up the next morning to a bucket of ice water poured straight over his head by a grinning Nash. "Rise and shine, punk, it's training time," he said, barely managing to keep the laughter out of his voice. "Son of a bitch," using one of swears he had picked up off Kogetsu. "That was sea cold," Naruto shouted, the ice making his teeth chatter slightly. He rolled out of bed. "Why the hell did you do that?" Nash responded, "Because you were asleep and I had to wake you up," he said, as if he dumped buckets of ice water on people every morning. Naruto grumbled something under his breath and reached for his training clothes. A simple t-shirt and pants made from a heavy durable material that would be worn down too fast to the hard rock that the cave was made from. "So why are you here instead of the geezer?" Naruto asked. Nash replied, "I'm here, because today you start reflex training today, and I'm the person who's going to be training you," he said with a grin that held something very different from happiness. Naruto gulped. Now he was nervous. It turned out that he had a good reason to be nervous. Reflex training consisted of Naruto dodging various weapons from a bin Nash had dragged out of a cabin on the top of the mountain, where he lived. For the next 2 hours Naruto jumped, ducked, dodged, sidestepped, and got hit by various blunt weapons. Until Kogastu came to collect he for the regular workout. 6 months later, Naruto awoke, 6 months after the first time he had been splashed with ice water, and stuck his right fist straight out to the side. It made contact with something that gave, and there was a sharp exhalation of breath, and then a small scream. He looked over and smiled. He had just nailed Nash into his crotch right as he lifted the bucket of ice water to wake him up. This forced Nash curling in a ball to deal with the pain. As he curled he dropped the bucket, which emptied its icy contents on the already suffering man. Naruto hopped out of bed, stepping over the cringing form of one of his teachers, and pulled in his standard training uniform. He proceeded to the door, and pushed it open, while a mutter of, "Damn evil midgets," followed him out. He grabbed his breakfast, which consisted of rice, venison, and eggs. He ate quickly and went to the area where he had reflex practice. which now was done with fully sharpened weapons. He had to wait 10 minutes for Nash to recover from his groin shot. When he finally limped into the training area, Naruto asked, "So how's the water today?" Nash flipped him the bird, and spoke in a higher than normal voice, "You're going to get it today, punk." He pulled his weapons bin towards him and extracted several Fuma shuriken. "You're really going to get it?" he yelled as he launched two of the oversized weapons at him. Both were dodged, but he hefted out a weapon even more dangerous. A cry was heard from the other side of the room, "You're not actually going to use that Zanbatsu." He trailed off as Nash spun once and launched the massive sword at him and lifted another out of the bin. Naruto started to move with two words on his mind, "Ah damn." Year 2. "Alright, boy, for the next year we will work on your intellect. You may have brawn now, but that mush between your ears isn't doing you much good," Kogetsu said one morning in early June, almost exactly 1 year after Naruto arrived at the cave. Naruto loved it in the cave, though he got out occasionally. He stayed in most of the time, because he was still scared of the people that had thrown him off the cliff. His attitude had undergone a dramatic overhaul. He was now a sarcastic, smart-ass little bastard, according to Nash, and a smart-ass, with foul mouth, and a temper according to Kogetsu. His mind was damaged thanks to his treatment of the village. He would have some people issues for the rest of his life, but Kogetsu and Nash had salvaged what they could. "Your routine will change. Now you only have exercises 3 times a week, to keep up the level you have already achieved. Monday will now be devoted to the study of politics, strategy, medicine, economics, and any other information I find necessary or you find interesting. You'll have access to my private library for this." Kogetsu continued. "Tuesday you will learn the basic use of shinobi tools. Kunai, shuriken, the pills and wire used by some. Wednesday, you will continue your conditioning. Thursday you will have tests of what you have learned Monday and Tuesday. Friday will be devoted to learning the intricate art of sealing." "Sealing?" Naruto cut in. "Yes, sealing, an art few practice, but can pay off for those who do it right. It is the art of using written scripts and chakra to manipulate forces, bodies, and space, like this." Kogetsu pulled out a small scroll and pricked his thumb. He applied his thumb to the scroll and forced his chakra through the blood. "You mean I have to cut myself all the time?" Naruto asked. "Sometimes, but you will become used to it or you'll have a psychotic episode." He chuckled. Naruto paled. A set of kunai popped out of the scroll. Blood is generally used as a medium for low-level sealing as it is extremely effective at conducting chakra. Special inks are used for higher-level sealing because it would require too much blood to scribe out all the words. Kogetsu explained before tossing Naruto the set of kunai. "Saturday, you will work out again, and Sunday will be yours to do with as you wish. But you still have a half day of reflex training," Kogetsu said before leading Naruto away. The next day, Naruto awoke at exactly 5 a.m. The next morning for his studies, his fist shot out to the right reflexively, but Nash was in the room, and so could not be racked. He hopped out of bed and went through his usual morning routines. He headed to the central room of the cave which he had dubbed the living area. Nash already there drinking milk from a carton. Nash looked over and spotted Naruto. He waved offhandedly, and called from the other side, "Morning, punk." Before going back to his carton, he shook it slightly and chuckled slightly, "Moo." Kogetsu walked out of a tunnel leading away from the room and spotted Naruto. "Good you're here," he began, before spotting Nash on the other side of the room. Then he spotted what he was drinking, and more specifically, what he was drinking it from. "Nash," the young man started, spilling milk on himself. "That better not be my carton of milk." Kogetsu spoke in a voice that promised pain if the answer was yes. Nash rotated the carton, and sure enough Kogetsu was written in capital letters. He nodded slowly. Kogetsu laughed at this, and said, "Then it a good thing I filled that milk with an extra strength laxative. An old man needs his regularity, you know." At this Nash rushed out of the room and down the tunnel that led to the bathroom. Kogetsu chuckled, and motioned for Naruto to follow. He led Naruto to a door with the intricate-looking seal pattern. "This is the door to my private library, one of the most comprehensive collection on the continent. Some of these books are hundreds of years old, so don't ruin anything, or you get a full 2 days of reflex training." Naruto paled at this. Most of the time he was about to fall flat on his face after 6 hours. Kogetsu tapped the door on a few different places, and pushed on one of the circles where the seals were grouped together. The door slid open by itself and Naruto followed his teacher inside. The room itself was massive, with a ceiling nearly 3 stories tall, and almost 100 yards across. Bookshelves lined the walls and floor, each one holding many hundreds of scroll, books, and various papers. Catwalk ran all the way around the room, connecting all levels of the library. Kogetsu climbed the stair to one bookshelf labeled ceiling, and began to pull out several scrolls. He tossed them to Naruto, who barely had time to read the titles before another was on its way. He only caught a few and had to pick up the rest off the floor. He read several of the titles: Ceiling for the Smart Ass Apprentice, by someone named Jiraiya, and How Not to Die Young, a Survival Guide for Beginning Shinobi, by Sarutobi Sasuke. When the two finally exited the library, Naruto was laden with so many scrolls that he was practically crawling on his knees to balance them all, and lift all of them at the same time. Who could have thought the scrolls could be so heavy? Kogetsu turned to him. All right. You have 2 weeks to read those, and then when you come back here, you will have to figure out the seal combination yourself, and it will change 2 weeks after that, getting progressively harder. At this, Naruto fell face flat as the prospect of reading more than 50 scrolls in 2 weeks came crashing down, along with the more than 50 scrolls he had been carrying. 6 months later, 2.5 years after he entered the cave, we find Naruto sitting at a desk in his room. On either side of him lay a pile of scrolls. On the right the scrolls sat in a bin labeled to read, on the left was label read. Naruto was studiously working his way through a particularly long scroll. For most people, even a ninja who was used to memorizing things, this scroll would take several hours, but Naruto appeared to finish it in just under half an hour. The unusual occurrence was caused by the 6 months of reading Naruto had been doing. The need to read faster forced him to develop the skills he needed. Kogetsu trained in a way not generally used in the shinobi world. Most people set goals and work to achieve them. Naruto had his goals set for him, and was forced to achieve them or fail, and failure was not an option with Kogetsu. So Naruto, with slight, but unknown pushes from his inner resident, adapted to the situation. In short, he needed to read faster, so he read faster. Most of the scrolls Naruto had read had absolutely nothing to do with being a shinobi, and those that did weren't about actual shinobi techniques. Those dealt with strategy, physiology, psychology, and chemistry. The ones that weren't related to shinobi arts at all dealt with politics, economics, laws, and history. In the 6 months Naruto had been given access to the library, he had read more books than the average shinobi did in the lifetime, however short it could be. But Naruto wasn't being trained to be an average shinobi, he was being trained to be the ultimate shinobi. Year 3, Naruto, Kogetsu said, and Naruto realized this was the first time he had been addressed by his real name, so he knew it was important. You have done well with my training, he continued, adopting a stern tone. You have progressed beyond anyone your age I've ever met, so as a reward for your diligence this next year we will study the skills of your choice, and you will choose what you want to learn. Naruto was shocked. His master rarely left anything up to him, except on Sundays of course, so he had no idea what he wanted to study. Master, Naruto began, please give me a day to think about what I want to study. This is surprising. His master nodded and Naruto bowed and walked to his room. Glancing across his living area, Naruto took in what he had been given. His room was the ninja equivalent to a Spartan. A small futon rested in one corner, and a bookshelf with most of his notes and information sealed into scrolls in another wall. A desk completed the decor. Naruto sat down and pulled up a scroll from the corner of his desk. He unsealed the notes inside and began to read and think about the future. 2 hours later he flopped to bed to think of his decisions. The next day, Naruto rose and greeted his master. Over breakfast Naruto spoke up, Master, I have decided what I wish to study. Naruto started. Continue, Kogetsu said. Master, I wish to study genjutsu. I have seen and read of the ninja today, and they have lost what history has shown what we could be. Ninja no longer strike from the shadows, inside, relying on showy attacks and massive armies to do what a poisoned knife, or a dedicated squad could accomplish. Genjutsu has this subtlety, one which many ignore, Naruto replied. An interesting choice, but your explanation is logical. The ninja have gone downhill since the time of the sage. Very well, we will study genjutsu on Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday, Kogetsu said with a touch of finality. 1 week later, a week after his decision to walk the path of the illusionary arts, Naruto found himself in the middle of the largest training room in the cave. Nash and Kogetsu stood in the room with him. Naruto stood with his fingers in a tiger seal, sweat beading on his forehead as both his teachers ran through several combinations of hand seals. Each series of seals was a different genjutsu technique, layered over the ones before it. Naruto's job was to break all the illusion and stay illusion-free for a full hour. What most ninja didn't know was that it was possibly to block genjutsu. It was a difficult art to learn, only found in one of the older scrolls in the library. Naruto had spent the previous week learning first how to dispel, then how to block genjutsu. Eventually he would learn how to redirect genjutsu, but that wouldn't be for a while. Naruto flinched as he broke another illusion, and saw the inside of the training room after several hours of different environments, only for the room to twist again, and total darkness to shatter his vision. He pressed his hands together again, and set about finding where this technique affected his body, and how to negate it. His instructors weren't holding back, and as the hours progressed the illusions got progressively worse, both in what they displayed, and the complex the ways they affected his body. After almost 7 hours of solid chakra use, Nash gave out, and Naruto shattered the illusions he had been fueling. He then turned his will toward Kogetsu, who sped up his hand speed to compensate for the loss of his first student's help. Naruto worked through several more layers before almost 2 hours later, Naruto won out. He fell to the floor exhausted, and Kogetsu dropped to one knee. Naruto turned his head over to Nash, who was resting in the corner. "You just had to add those nut-knocking illusions, didn't you, you bastard?" He picked up a rock off the cave floor, and chucked it at his senpai. An exhale, and a cry of, "God damn midgets," was heard before Nash collapsed on the ground. 6 months later, in the same part of the cave the training had started in, Naruto and his instructors stood with Nash and Kogetsu, and Nash on one side, and Naruto on the other. All three of them were running through seals faster than the average shinobi could have followed. To an outside observer it would have appeared that nothing was actually happening, but the real war took place in the minds of the fighters. Sweat collected on Naruto's brow as he accelerated his hands. He was making twice as many seals as the other two, and with the specialized hand seal that he had created that allowed chakra to be molded in something that was workable for genjutsu, he had out the need for several seal combinations that did the same thing. He could now use basic illusions with a single hand seal, and more complex illusions that required more hand seals to specify what type of illusion it was could be done in less than 10. Nash began to twitch, then he collapsed on the floor, whimpering like a small puppy. Naruto smirked, and turned his focus to his sensei. His hands moved several times as faster, and Kogetsu dropped to one knee and tapped the floor. "Yield," he croaked. Naruto's face split into a massive grin, and he broke to illusion on his master. He stood, and looked over at Nash, who was still on the floor twitching. "What did you do to him?" Kogetsu asked. If possible, Naruto's grin grew wide. He said only one word: racked. Year 4. Naruto. Kogetsu started, almost exactly 4 years after Naruto had entered the cave. "We are about to start the final year of your training. After this, you will be able to leave and travel freely like Nash." "So what do we learn this year?" Naruto asked. His teacher replied, "This year, we will delve into the more powerful, and generally forbidden shinobi arts. And yes, before you ask, you get your own item like mine and Nash's." Naruto gave a silent V for victory sign, and asked, "When do we start?" "We start when I feel like it," Kogetsu said, "and we start now." His sensei's eyes narrowed dangerously. Naruto asked, "So what do I learn first?" In a voice that was obviously well controlled. Naruto never liked to appear overly excited. "First, you will get the talk." A rumbling was heard outside the cave, and something that sounded like thunder shook Naruto's home. Kogetsu ignored this and went on, "We'll see about getting your item tomorrow," Kogetsu said. He got up, and Naruto took a step back. "Did you just hear the thunder just now? I thought it was sunny outside." Kogetsu laughed. That always happens about this time." He then proceeded to drag Naruto into an empty room, where it was explained to him the many differences between males and females. At the same time, Nash was just walking into the cave, having been summoned back by Kogetsu. He saw Naruto stumble out of the empty room in a dazed, eyes glazed over. "Just got the talk, huh?" Nash asked. Naruto slowly inclined his head and brought it back up. Nash slapped Naruto on the back and said, "Buck up, kid, it could be worse. You could have gotten it from some nymphomaniac, who used herself as an example." Nash shuddered as he remembered the time he received the talk. Naruto nodded. "I finally understand why your cabin smells like women," he said before stumbling off, muttering, "and what the villagers meant when they said you were playing." Naruto simply stumbled into his room and collapsed on his futon to process the new information. Kogastu walked out of the room chuckling the whole way until he met up with Nash. They both looked at each other and burst out laughing. It quieted down and Nash asked, "Do you think he's ready? I was 17 when I first got my gauntlets." Kogastu replied, "Naruto is more than ready. He got the potential to be the most powerful shinobi since the Sage of Six Paths. I'm just glad you found and before he dragged himself back to Konoha. Who knows how they would have squandered his talent. Well, that place treat him like shit to be thrown away just because of a seal on his stomach," Nash said sadly, remembering when he first met Naruto. "So what are we going to do when he turns 12? Nash asked. Kogastu replied, "I guess we'll give him a choice, go back to Konoha, travel with you and make his own path," Kogastu replied. "I wonder what happened to the leaf after he disappeared," Nash asked. Flashback technique. 2 days after Naruto was hurled off the cliff, the third Hokage of the Leaf Village was beginning to worry. He hadn't seen hide or hair of Naruto, which was unusual because he was a notorious troublemaker. He called his personal Anbu squad, the Black Hawk Ops, more details on these later in the story, and sent them on a search. 12 hours later they came back with nothing, except some bragging in the headquarters that the demon was dead. The third heard this and one could swear he learned Flying Thunder God, because he was at Anbu headquarters faster than you could say, "Kunai." He seized the one who made the claims and slammed him against the wall. "Where's Naruto?" he shouted. "You mean the demon? He's dead. I tossed him off a cliff outside the village," the Anbu said with an air of superiority. When someone is a ninja they learn many things, but one of the first things is you do not piss off a cage, because you'll either die quick and painful or slow and painful, depending on the leader's mood. "Send him to Ibiki," the third said. "I need to think." Sarutobi went back to his office, placed his head on his desk and thought, "Naruto, wherever you are, I hope you're in a better place and I begged your forgiveness." The village council unanimously denied a full investigation. End flashback. The next day, Naruto woke up his normal self, having processed the information from the previous night. He went down to the kitchen, made himself breakfast, ate, then he headed to where his master was if he didn't eat breakfast with him. Kogastu was sitting on a rock, thinking of how to explain the Kyuubi to Naruto. Naruto arrived at the rock and sat down in front of his sense. He was used sitting motionless. Years of meditation really help build patience. "Naruto," Kogastu spoke, "it is time to learn the greatest secret about yourself. Stand up, take your shirt off and mold some chakra." Naruto did so and Kogastu spoke again, "Now look at your stomach." Naruto did this also and saw the seal that held the Kyuubi no Kitsune. "Naruto, have you ever heard of the Kyuubi attacking your old village?" Kogastu asked. Naruto nodded and he continued, "To stop it the fourth Hokage sacrificed his life to seal it within a child and that child was you." Naruto stared blankly into space. "So this is why I was mistreated?" "Yes. And why did he chose me to seal it?" "I don't know. How long have you known? Since you arrived at the cave. Why didn't you tell me?" Naruto asked in soft monotone. "I want to make sure you were capable of controlling it before you knew of its power," Kogastu replied. "I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, but it was necessary. You're lucky this cave represses chakra and stamina." Naruto's eyes widened. "Oh, did I forget to mention that? Yes, this cave has your chakra and stamina. It's the ultimate training facility, but it also kept Kyuubi from influencing you." He continued chuckling. "You mean this whole time I've been at half power?" Naruto asked. "Yep," Kogastu replied. Naruto stopped for a moment, then an echo of, "Hell yes," was heard throughout the cave. "And now I think you're ready for what you asked about 3 years ago, your own celestial item. Come on, follow me." Naruto was stunned for a moment and a cry of "fuck yes" followed the echo of the first sound. As Kogastu led Naruto, he explained exactly what the items were. Now, celestial items mold themselves to the creator's skills and personality. I used to be a veteran warrior, before I was found by the previous guardian. and so was given armor, or how Nash prefers to work with his hands, so he was given gauntlets. Nash likes to work with his hands, Naruto asked, of course. Where do you think all your weapons came from? And where do you think Nash got all those weapons he threw at you? Kogastu asked. Naruto gave a nod of understanding. He had never really thought about it. It was just a fact of life that weapons were available in the cave, and kept walking. We're here, Kogetsu said after 10 more minutes of walking. We are currently in the deepest part of the mountain. He walked up to a set of large double doors, and pushed them open. Inside the room, there appeared to be many large chunks of celestial material. The material was completely clear, but shone brighter with an ethereal energy that gave it the aura of power that was also commanded by Kogastu's armor. Kogastu continued his explanation. Celestial items are called so because they are the purest material now in existence. The material had been here so long that even the Guardians have forgotten how it came to be, but I believe that it is made of the recycled souls of the best fighters in the world. They reflect the will of the bearer. If a user is cruel and malignant, they will darken, and if he or she is helpful and unselfish, the item will be clear. There are also white and dark items which are similar to celestial items but have augmentative abilities and can only be used by certain people. White items can only be used by the pure of heart, and dark items can only be used by the darkest people. Naruto looked perplexed. So Kogetsu elaborated, there are many types of items, but none are as common as light and dark. Most of these are obtained two ways, either having one given to you. This works for white or dark items. Dark items can be stolen though, or both can be obtained by making a pact with a low-level angels or demon. Most dark items are obtained the first way, and white items by the second. Celestial items can only be obtained here. Celestial items can only be used by people who deemed worthy by me, the guard of the material, and the material itself accepts you. The other items can be used as long as you have the right mindset. Now your item will never be completely clear, no matter how good you try to be, because of Kyuubi's malignant will inside you. But don't worry about the color, just live life how you want, Kogastu finished. Now go find one of the pieces and channel as much chakra as you can. It will hurt because the material has to bond to your being, your soul in other words, and you'll never be able to have it taken away. If it is lost, it will appear back in the spot it's supposed to be, Kogastu started. Naruto found a good-sized piece of material and placed both hands on it. He lets his chakra flow into the material, and he started to force as much energy as he could into it. The material was so pure that you could see the blue swirling within it. Then the pain came. It started as a pins and needles sensation, then multiplied in full-blown torture, but Naruto pressed on, ignoring the pain as much as possible, thinking about his meditation techniques, and then he redoubled his efforts. His large reserve worked against him here, as he had to push in almost all of his energy. He pushed until he had nothing left and collapsed, out for the count. The material, though, began to give off light, then it began to change its shape. It started to shake like a guy out in a snowstorm in a swimsuit and burst into a shape obscured by the light. Finally it all came to rest, and next to Naruto was his item. It was a hat. A slightly cone-shaped hat like those from the Akatsuki organization. The kind that was worn by peasants and samurai. It was slightly gray in color and would fit snugly onto Naruto's head. A small strap to loop around the chin was already attached. Kid, you never stop amazing me. Kogastu picked up the hat and it flashed and disappeared, then appeared on Naruto's head. He threw Naruto himself over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes and walked back to the front parts of the cave. He dropped Naruto on his futon and went to his own room to get some sleep. It had been a trying day. The morning after, Naruto awoke with an odd feeling on his head. He felt around and found his hat and pulled it off to look at it. It was cool to the touch and strangely comforting. This is my celestial item. Wonder what this symbolizes, Naruto thought. He got out of bed and went to find his master. He found him in his teacher snoring like an elephant and sprawled out on his futon. Naruto made a quick one-handed seal and tapped his master's arm. This released the chakra formed by the seal and created a genjutsu that made the recipient think ice-cold water had been dumped on them. Needless to say, Kogastu woke with a start, and when he found out what happened, grumbled for a while and went to get breakfast. "Alright, brat, today we will start training with your hat, to find out what it can do," Kogastu said, and Naruto lit up at the prospect of learning something new. "After I eat my cereal," He finished and Naruto deflated as Kogetsu took an agonizingly slow bit out of a giant bowl of cereal with an unusually small spoon. Naruto flipped him off. Same day. Alright, Naruto, first thing you need to know about your hat is that it's semi-conscious. It is aware of its surroundings and has an intimate knowledge of its and your powers. It will also be well versed in your best skill, in this case Fuinjutsu, so it's like you having two minds to think about sealing. It can offer strategy advice and maybe some genjutsu tips. Kogetsu explained. So I can talk to my hat and it can talk to me, and it can help me fight, Naruto asked. Kogetsu responded, yes, and it is a more effective sealing method than blood. Blood is an effective method because it has been in contact with your chakra for so long that it naturally channels. Your hat on the other hand is 45% of your chakra. So it can be used to write seals on. It should also be able to store items, much more efficiently than a sealing scroll. First thing we need to do is contact your hat, Kogetsu continued. Get into a meditative stance and try to think upward. I know it's a difficult concept to grasp, but try forcing your thoughts through the top of your head, Kogetsu said in a patient tone, knowing it would take a while to achieve. Naruto sat in the lotus position and tried to force his thoughts up. He started simple. Hello. He thought over and over for a quarter of an hour until, is that you, man, came through into Naruto's head. Naruto tentatively responded, are you my hat? Yeah, man, I'm your hat, how ya doing? I'm doing pretty well, hat, can I call you hat? Sure, it's what I am, right. So what are going to do now? I know everything about you and you know pretty much everything about me, so you got any ideas? The hat responded, we could work on genjutsu or fuinjutsu. Naruto said back, sure. Man. Hey, I thought of a way you can use seal less genjutsu and help with fuin and some offensive shit too. I worked it out from an idea you had earlier. Hat. You are the coolest piece of head wherever, so which idea was it? The one with the eyes or the one with the brain mutation? Naruto said, happy as a fangirl who got a date with Uchiha Sasuke. The one that involved the eyes, but Kogetsu said that it would be impossible without several miles of sealing paper. Naruto said, then trailed off as he realized exactly what he had on his head. First, no shit isn't possible, and second, if we use me as a sealing medium and some blood paper, and some of the chakra ink, we could alter your eyes to automatically expel chakra in a form usable for genjutsu, and they could see through and convert the sealing language to English automatically, so there would be no translation errors. Plus we could add an element conversion factor so it could change your chakra in one element without seals. Hat, that is the single most brilliant idea I have ever heard, and I've heard a lot of brilliant ideas, being me and all, Naruto said. I'll ask sensei, and if he agrees we could do it tonight, Naruto said. By the look on your face, I take it the hat came up with something good, Kogetsu said. Naruto proceeded to explain what the hat wanted to do. Kogetsu was amazed that the hat had come up with an idea like this that fast. This is unheard of, it must have something to do with there already being two minds in Naruto's body, Kogetsu thought. Alright, Naruto, you can go through with it as long as I'm there to review the sealing so you don't go blind during the procedure. Kogetsu chuckled. Nash almost lost his hands when he tried to modify his gauntlets. So who'd you stop him? Naruto asked. I smacked him upside the head and knocked him out halfway through. Naruto's eyebrow twitched. Naruto proceeded to gather the materials needed, and began to write the sealing scripts on his hat and the blood paper. Blood paper is different than other paper because it has been cut from a tree grown from your chakra and infused with amounts of your blood. It will only work for you because it is almost literally a part of you and thus can be used for sealing easily. Chakra ink is special because it is made from the dye of a plant grown from a seed with chakra and mixed with several powder stones that are receptive to chakra. It took 9 hours to complete the sealing scripts because he had little experience with elemental sealing. Naruto, with advice from his hat, researched, translated and wrote nearly half a mile of script on 5 square inches of paper and a hat 1.5 feet in diameter. This may seem impossible. Specialized sealing objects can layer seals on top of each other. The end result had 184 layers of seals. It was at 11 a.m. the next morning that Naruto sat in the lotus position with his hat in front of him and the 2 pieces of blood on top of it. He placed his hands on top of the 2 pieces PF paper and started to pump chakra into both of them. They both started to glow, and when they reached a near blinding level, Naruto placed both of them over his eyes. And then he screamed. It was pain like nothing he had ever felt. His old eyes dissolved and the new one grew into his sockets, but Naruto passed out halfway through the process. 2 days later, Naruto awoke to a throbbing pain behind his eyes. He expected this as he had just had his eyes destroyed and regrown. "Hey man, you awake?" the voice of the hat came through. "Yeah, I'm awake, hat. What you need?" "Nothing. But check your eyes out in the mirror." Naruto walked over to the small mirror next to his bookshelf, and gasped. His eyes were now completely black, except for the iris which was a glowing red. The effect creeped him out, and he knew it would scare enemies ever more. Deciding to test his new abilities, he took out a blank scroll. He and the hat had decided fire was the best element to include in his new eyes. It was the easiest to convert because heat was everywhere. He focused on the scroll and his eyes and the images of fire in his mind. He stood like this for a full hour before the scroll burst into flames. Better learn to control that, he thought. Yep, the hat agreed. Naruto spent the next few months getting accustomed to his new eyes. He gained control over the fire capabilities, and the genjutsu came easy to him after his many years of study. Together with his hat he uncovered more seals and possibilities for his techniques. This continued until a month before his next birthday, where he was set to turn 12. For the first time in his life, Naruto felt content. He had his teacher Kogastu, his friend Nash, and his hat to keep him company. It was also only a week before his birthday. Naruto had just finished up his new training regiment, which called for chakra control to do everything. Push-ups on the water, sit-ups on the ceiling, and one-finger vertical push-ups while balancing on the tip of a kunai. Naruto was getting himself a snack from his personal pantry that included Pocky, and more Pocky. He had become addicted to it when his sensei bought some for him while they were in a nearby village restock on supplies. He had actually bought it to get him to shut up while he shopped. An explosion rang out from the outside of the cave. Naruto ran to see what had caused it when the door opened and Nash came flying through. Heavily wounded, he stood up and formed hand seal at a rate that would make Orochimaru look like an academy student. He stopped on Tora and fire coalesced around his fists, and he ran outside again. Naruto followed and saw several figures in black cloaks with dark-looking weapons fighting Nash in an all-out hand-to-hand war. Nash tore through one with his burning fists, and back-kicked another into a tree. He continued to fight until 5 more figures emerged. Then one of the assailants that appeared to be dead reached up and stuck a knife in Nash's back. He fell to the ground, poison spreading through his system. He was dead before he hit the ground. Meanwhile, Naruto saw Nash fall and ran, knowing he had no chance against cruel fighters in black. He disappeared back into the cave and into a secret hiding spot he had built for himself. The fighters in black entered the cave in a line and spread out. They parted ranks and man walked into the man. His most striking feature was his completely white skin, snake-like eyes, and the glowing longsword he held in his hand. Orochimaru, Naruto thought. Then Kogastu walked out in front in full battle dress. He carried a spear in one hand and a short sword in the other. "You shall go no further, little heathen," Kogastu shouted, taking a fighting stance and waiting for a response. "Old bastard," Orochimaru greeted. "It has been a long time since I first came here, but since you denied me the celestial material, I have no choice but to kill you and take it," he shouted as he and the warriors lunged. Kogastu fought like a madman, taking on 8 black warriors at the same time, but just as he struck one down, Orochimaru appeared behind him and shoved his long sword through his spine. Kogastu collapsed. "Why, you bastard, I'll make sure you don't get the celestial material." Kogastu made a one-handed seal and there was a rumble from deep inside the cave. "I have sealed it off from the world forever. Now, no one can abuse its power," Kogastu choked out. "Miserable old fool," Orochimaru shrieked. He motioned for his warriors. "We leave," he said before exiting the cave. Naruto jumped from his hiding spot and ran to his master, sensei. He called, "En Naruto." Kogastu started before coughing up blood. "Naruto, kill Orochimaru, you're stronger than him now, don't let his goals be achieved." Kogastu stopped. "Use my library and my scrolls, learn all you need to and make your own PP path." And so the last celestial guardian died, leaving behind the final command for his apprentice. At the moment, Naruto changed all. He let his mask of cheerfulness fall to dust. He decided he would not take what life had given him, that every time he got something good, it wouldn't be taken away. "Naruto, you know what we have to do, right?" "Yes," came the response. Naruto gathered his master's body and carried it outside. There he dug 2 graves and buried his master and his first friend. He took Nash's mask, so he could carry with him a piece of his first friend. He sat next to the graves for a long while, thinking of what he was going to do next. He finally got up and headed back into the cave. He walked to his master's part of the cave and headed for the library. There was a small scroll on a pedestal, marked for Naruto. He picked it up and read, "Dear Naruto, if you're reading this then I'm dead. Sucks to be me, huh? Anyway, I hope I got a chance to say goodbye. First off, if I was killed by a group of people in dark cloaks, then I was killed by the dark item users. Last I heard they are working with Orochimaru, who came to this cave almost a decade ago, demanding I hand over my store of celestial material. Now even if I wasn't killed by Orochimaru, I want you to kill him to stop his twisted ideas to become reality. In my library I have records of almost every subject, noteworthy person, and location on this continent. Use this to help you achieve your goals. Finally, even if I tried to stay mostly emotionally detached, I always thought of you as a son. So use what I have given you, make Konoha pay for their crimes against an innocent child and achieve your dreams. Your father, Kogastu." As Naruto read the letter, he let a single tear slide down his face, then his eyes hardened and his rock-steady determination set in. "I will fulfill my master's last wish," he thought. "We will?" the hat corrected. "Yeah, we will," Naruto finished. Naruto gathered his wits and began to think. He glanced around the room and saw a chest labeled, Naruto's birthday. He filed away for a later date. For the next week, Naruto read through his master's library. With the help of shadow clones he read the many thousand books and scrolls in 6 days. On the 7th day Naruto celebrated his own birthday by opening the chest his master had left for him. Inside was a cloak similar to Nash's except it had a hood. Think Anbu who wear outside the barrier at the Chunin finals in canon. Inside the cloak were several thousand layers of seals, some enhancing the cloak's strength and durability while others wear simple storage seals capable of holding almost as much as his hat. The other item in the chest was a scroll. Naruto opened it and nearly fainted in shock, because it was a scroll he had been searching for since he started to master Fuinjutsu. The scroll explained how to link to ceiling objects, like his cloak and his hat, through a network of chakra lines that allowed them to share each other's properties. He set about linking his cloak and his hat as fast as Naruto's better than human so it's not humanly as Naruto's possible. It took him 18 hours and enough ink to write every textbook in the Ninja Academy, but he succeeded in linking both of them. The link gave Naruto's hat control over the cloak so items sealed in the hat could be taken out of the cloak. The cloak also gained some of the strengthening properties of the hat. Naruto then searched around the cave until he found what he was looking for, Nash's lab, forge. Inside were thousands of throwing weapons Nash had forged over his life. Small sickles for throwing, senbon needles, and bins of thousands of basic kunai and shuriken. He proceeded to seal every one of the cloak and hat. It totaled 45,000 weapons, all made over the course of 15 years. He then made his way to the lab, where he extracted every poisonous substance and explosive materials he could acquire. He sealed those in the cloak and hat as well. Then after a well-balanced lunch, he began on his cloak and hat. He created a system inside his outfit that allowed it to respond to his thoughts, so all he would have to do is think and he could unseal a kunai in his sleeve and grab it. He also matrixed the poison and explosives with the weapons so the kunai could be poisoned and have an explosive tag attached as they were unsealed. For the next 6 months, Naruto trained day and night, sometimes up to 18 hours a day. He began a Fuinjutsu project that he had completed by the end of the half-year. He trained his body with chakra control and workouts, while he used shadow clones to train his mind by reading new scrolls and working on strategy. By the end, he had near cage-level chakra capacity and almost perfect control over it. 6 months after Naruto's 12th birthday, Naruto lay in the center of a small sealing circle. Shadow clones scurried about with pots of chakra ink, paint sealing on Naruto's abdomen. When the seals were finished, all the clones dispelled except for 3 which stood on the edge of the circle. Naruto nodded his head and the clones began to pump chakra into the circle. The ceiling lines started to glow a soft blue, then the lines on Naruto flared a fierce yellow. Naruto gritted his teeth against the pain, and when the light died down and the clones dispelled, Naruto got up and looked at his chest. It was covered in seals, with a circle in the center with the kanji for lightning in the circle. "Alright, our new lightning conversion matrix is done, with many thanks to me," the hat piped up happily. Yes, you did everything, hat," Naruto replied sarcastically. Naruto's conversion matrix worked similar to his eyes, which he had named Reader Eyes. It converted his chakra into lightning nature chakra usable for techniques. Eventually his eyes would allow him to memorize how the seal worked, and do this for himself. He also planned to do this for the other elements eventually. Naruto sealed all the food in the cave, including his Pocky, then he made his way to the library and sealed away all the books. Then he said goodbye to the place that had been his home for the last 5 years. He paid his respects to his master and friend and set out toward the village hidden in the leaves. 2 days later, a cloaked figure walked up to the gates of Konohagakure no Sato. The guards demanded the usual papers, but a look from the figure had them thinking no one was even there. Under the cloak Uzumaki Naruto smirked. "I'm back, people," he thought. He got a hotel room, for free of course as he had little money, and waited for night to fall. In the dead of night a figure crept onto the roof of a generic hotel building and began roof-hopping his way to the center of the village. The figure wore a black Anbu cloak, and a hunter nin mask. Finishing off his look was a hat that appeared to be a standard thatched straw hat, but was actually made of one of the rarest minerals on Earth. Naruto, for it was he of course, crept into the Hokage tower, hypnotizing anyone he came across and making his way past various security measures. He reached the Hokage's office and began to inspect the room. His eyes picked up faint traces of sealing on one of the walls. He walked up to and pulled out a small piece of paper. He took out a small ink brush and painted a design on the paper. He gave it a small burst of chakra. He stuck on the wall and it released the seal, letting the wall fade away to reveal the Hokage private storage room. He walked inside and pulled out a camera and several rolls of film. He photographed everything he could, including the forbidden scroll of seals. He then removed the records with the label Uzumaki and all relations to those records. "Ah," came a yawn from behind Naruto. He whirled around to find the third Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves. "Old man?" Naruto asked. Sarutobi was alert in an instant. "There's only one person that called me that, and he's been missing for years." Naruto stripped off the mask to reveal his matured features. "Naruto?" The third stuttered out. "Yeah, it's me," came the reply. "I thought you were dead. You fell off a cliff?" he said incredulously. "I survived through sheer willpower, and I was found by people who were willing to help me. Unlike this village," he spat out the word village. "I just came back to find out who my parents were, and imagine my surprise when my father is the fourth Hokage, great hero this village had ever seen, and his son is treated worse than a rabid dog." He got out through gritted teeth. "Naruto, I'm sorry for your treatment," Sarutobi began, but Naruto cut in. "Sorry? Sorry doesn't cut, old man. I'm through with this place now and forever." He called down some. "The record makes no mention of my mother's status, but if I were to hazard a guess, I'd say she's alive but thinks, like the village, that I'm Kyuubi incarnate and would sooner crucify me than treat me like a son," Naruto said. No response came from the third, but the downcast look on his face told the entire story. "Holy crap, I'm right, aren't I?" Naruto questioned. The third only nodded. "Then, I'll just have to show her what a real demon is." Naruto then lifted up his hat, which had shadowed the upper half of his face, to reveal his black and red eyes, which now glowed in holy mixture of the two colors. At this point Sarutobi was freaked, thinking the fox had taken over. Reading his mind, Naruto said, "Don't worry, Kyuubi hasn't taken over. I made these eyes for myself, and I'll give you a demo." Fire erupted from Naruto's body and shot towards the third. He dodged of course, but by the time the smoke had cleared, Naruto was long gone. 5 minutes later Naruto was outside the village walls without a trace that he had ever been there, besides his encounter obviously. He began heading north, where he could get his photographs developed and maybe turn in a few bounties. The next day, Leaf Village Council Chambers. A day after the incident, the council was called together for a report on what happened. Needless to say, when they learned it was Naruto who instigated this break-in, everyone in the room called for his death. The Hokage called the council explaining the demon had not taken over. This fact was ignored by the majority of the room. "We should have killed that cretin when we had the chance," one member shouted. Another called to send an entire platoon of hunters after him. "The demon obviously had control, and it needs to be put down as soon as possible," came the opinion of one Inuzuka Sume. A chorus of agreement was heard. "Fools," came the response of Hyuga Hiyashi. "If we send large number of our ninja after one boy, what does that say about the might of our village? That we need half of our shinobi to track down a 12-year-old, we should make him a S-rank criminal. And others will track him down for us. Then we simply kill whoever brought him in. And nobody will remember this ever happened," the head Hyuga stated. The council elders stood up, all in favor of the Hyuga's plan? The majority of the hands were raised. "Good, see that is done. Dismissed," one of the elder. "Fools," Sarutobi muttered. "This will bring more trouble than it's worth." 2 days later, Whirlpool Country. Uzumaki Kushina was not an easily surprised woman, but when she got the latest bingo book, and her son stare out at her from it, she was spooked. "That demon is still alive," she thought angrily, "doesn't even have the decency to die and save me the trouble." "Children, assemble," Kushina shouted. Not 5 seconds later 4 children entered the room. 2 boys and 2 girls, both the girls and the boys appeared to be separate sets of twins. "Yes, mother," they chant as one. "It appears the demon in your brother's body is still alive. You remember what to do, right?" Kushina asked. The first boy pulled out a sickle and chain and said, "I will destroy his corrupted body." The next boy pulled out a sword. "I will destroy his heart." Then the first girl in line took out a bow staff with sharpened ends. "I will destroy his mind." The final girl in line removed a large set of dual sickle from a holster. "And I will set from over brother's soul, so that he might pass on peacefully." Kushina smiled. "Very good, children. Together we will set your brother and my son free." Same time, near the Wave Country. Naruto was headed for the Land of Waves for 2 reasons. One, he had gotten a tip the shipping tycoon, Gato, had contact with Orochimaru, and might have a clue to his location. 2, Gato was rich and powerful and he needed to take out a non-repayable loan. What he also knew is that a genin team from Konoha had been spotted in the area. They might be worth eliminating to decrease Konoha's number of young shinobi. Naruto arrived outside Tazuna's house and set up camp half a mile away. He observed as the genin team practiced tree walking. Pathetic, he thought. I did this training when I was 7, and it was a harder version. If this is the level of Konoha's genin, I don't need to worry. He saw 4 genin and their Junin instructor, who he recognized as Sharingan Kakashi. Of the 4 genin, one was tall, had a mini afro and a collared trench coat. He gathered his name was Shino. Another was a overly loud blonde who he understand names to be Ino. Then next was as loud as the first, but had pink hair. Both were weak to the lowest standard. The final one was doing better than Shino and far better than the other 2. For this one he needed no ID, he knew this one's name to be Uchiha Sasuke. He crept away after watching them for an hour. He got a quarter mile away before he ran into Kakashi. "Uzumaki Naruto, why were you spying on my team?" Kakashi asked. Naruto responded, "Do you need to know? And even if you do, you can't stop me. Your stance and body language tells me you're suffering from chakra exhaustion." "Be that as it may, I still want to know why," Kakashi said. "If you must know, I was checking the talent of the new rookie genin, but these don't seem to be worth their weapons," he said before moving past Kakashi and walking away. The day after, Zabuza's hideout. The demon of the hidden mist was currently recovering, swathed in bandages like a newborn is cloth. All he could feel was pain, and it hurt. "Hiku, I need more of those pain meds," Zabuza called. A young boy about 13 or 14 walked into the room. "Zabuza-sama, I told you, you can't have any for the next 6 hours." "I don't care, give me the meds." Hiku sighed and walked out of the room. Sometimes dealing with his master was so troublesome. Oh. Konoha. Somewhere in the Leaf Village, a lazy genin sneezed. Oh. Hiku headed outside the compound and started into the forest. He neared his usual herb gathering spot when a cloak figure dropped down in front of him and looked him in the eyes. He passed out a few moments later. Naruto picked up Hiku and slung him over his shoulder. He headed back toward the place Hiku had just left. He crept through all the way to Zabuza's room and threw Hiku on the ground. He released the genjutsu and he woke up. Zabuza's head shot up when Haku hit the ground. "Haku, what's going on?" he asked, instincts screaming at him that he should be away from here now. "Momochi Zabuza," came a hollow monotonous voice, "I've come here to offer you a deal." "Who the hell are you?" Zabuza asked, more curious than anything. "Some snot-nosed punk thinking he can make a name for himself by bringing me in, because you're out of your league, kid." "You're right," Naruto said, and Zabuza smirked behind his bandages. "I'm way beyond your league." Naruto laughed hollowly as fire started to blossom around the room. "Crap," Zabuza thought. He looked over at Haku and then at Naruto, his trained mind calculating options. But as his gaze left Naruto, he froze. It's not a good idea to try to think about killing someone who comes to you with a way out of Gato's clutches. Realizing that he was screwed either way, Zabuza asked, "So what's this deal, kid?" The fire died down around the room. "One, don't ever call me kid again," Naruto growled. 2. Gato currently holds the majority shares in hundreds of companies, and he has billions of ryo in cash that he takes with him everywhere. Apparently he doesn't like banks. "I'm offering you 25% of that money to help me get the rest of his assets away from his grubby little hands," Naruto explained. "So what do we have to do?" Zabuza asked. Naruto explained his plan. "One question, who the hell are you?" "Someone with big plans for the future," Naruto said before he disappeared in a poof of smoke. Haku snapped out of his daze and asked, "What just happened, Zabuza-sama?" "No idea, Haku, but I'll tell you one thing's it's going to be real interesting from now on," Zabuza said. "Oh, and I need some more of those pain pills, now," and with that Zabuza collapsed. Naruto on the other hand was invigorated at the fact that his plan was coming together. He headed back to his own camp. He began work on his new original technique, the body clone. In case I have explained Naruto's hat and cloak thing, I'll use an analogy. Think of the hat as a computer hard drive. It's got the potential, but nothing to direct it. The seals on the hat are like software. They tell the hard drive what to do. Now think of the cloak as a second, slightly less powerful hard drive. They are linked by a wireless connection, or in this case, chakra. Since their linked, processing power can be shared between them. Not think of the kunai in his cloak as a printer that had paper. You can put paper in a printer, have it sit for a while and then print it. It can come out looking just like it did before it went in, because it just sat there. Now the self-poisoning and tagging are like word processors. They can add things to the paper or kunai. Now kunai in the hat, printer, can be sent wirelessly to the cloak. That's the best explanation I can come up with. Part of this chapter will be hard to write. Can you guess what it is? Also, there will be at least one plot twist in this chapter, which I haven't seen done a lot anywhere. And with that, start the chapter. 6 days later, Zabuza's hideout. "Haku," Zabuza called, "get ready. We move for the bridge in an hour." "Hi, Zabuza-sama," Haku called back. Zabuza grabbed his zanbato, and sat down to wait for Haku to prepare. Same time, Naruto's camp. Naruto geared up for the operation about to take place. He sealed some soldier pills he had lifted off a couple of Gato's men, unsealed the map of Gato's hideout he had taken for a sentry on the docks, and he set out to do his work. Meanwhile, Gato's hideout. Hiroshi, with Sashi get the men ready, were headed out toward the bridge. Gato yelled in what he thought was a commanding tone, but was actually high and nasally. "You two," he motioned for 2 guards near the edge of the room. "You know what to do." They simply nodded and left. Tazuna's house. "All right, team," Kakashi said. "Zabuza has had plenty of time to recover, so we're all going to the bridge today." Ino and Sakura looked at each other frightfully. Sasuke smirked, was Shino's response. Gato's hideout. 1 hour later. Naruto arrived at the hideout to find it completely empty. Looks like they went after Zabuza after all, he thought as he headed down the corridors to where the map indicated Gato's office would be. He walked inside. He noticed extremely faint traces of writing on one spot on the wall behind the desk. He hopped the desk and looked at the wall for a moment. He saw that the wall was simple wood and gave the spot a blast of fire. Behind the wood was a safe the size of a small walk-in closet. The safe was made of chakra-reinforced steel and couldn't be melted. Naruto had anticipated the safe, and so he unsealed 4 kunai with shape charges attached. Shape charges were explosive tags that were sealed in a way that forced the explosion in a specific direct, in this case inward. He stuck the 4 knives at the 4 corners of the safe, gave each one a burst of chakra to ignite them, and then took cover behind the desk. The explosion blew that desk back, but Naruto replaced himself with a painting on the wall. He was fine, but the door was effectively blown off its damn hinges, as some would say. He walked into the safe and looked around. Several briefcases held the stocks to Gato's companies. These Naruto sealed in his hat and turned to face the rest of the safe. There was over 200 billion ryo in there. Damn, even more than I estimated, Naruto thought. About half was in bonds and rare jewels held in glass cases. The rest was in large notes, 100,000 each to be exact. He took all of this and sealed it in his cloak and some various scrolls on his person. He swiftly headed out of the base. Even though the entire episode took about 20 minutes, that was a long time in the ninja world. Incomplete bridge, same time. Zabuza held a stalemate with Kakashi, neither willing to give, while the girls stood shakily in front of Tazuna. Meanwhile, Sasuke and Shino were fighting and losing to Haku, steadily taking more damage while trapped in his ice mirrors. Alright, this is enough, Kakashi thought. He wiped some of his blood from a minor wound on a scroll and slammed it into the ground. Summoning. Tracking Fang technique, Kakashi shouted. The large dogs burst through the concrete and latch onto Zabuza's arms. At the same time, Sasuke, still trapped in the ice mirrors, began to realize something. All of the most powerful ninja I've met have left their villages. My brother, Zabuza, and this boy all gained power through leaving their villages, he thought as he dodged the needle with his newly activated Sharingan. Shino was having a tougher time, as he had no eyes. There was movement. He had only gotten by this long by replacing himself with his bugs every time needles headed his way. Fortunately, he had also had his bugs attached to the back of several of the mirrors, and they began to eat their way through. Their break came when Haku sped toward one of the mirrors with bugs on it, and the bugs ate their way through the mirror, and with warning Haku dropped out. Several bugs latched onto him and began to drain his energy. Meanwhile, Sasuke, who had been tracking Haku through his Sharingan, sped through seals and shouted, "Blazing Fireball technique," and launched a massive fireball toward Haku. Haku was just starting to brush off the bugs, when he turned to see the fireball speeding toward him in time to be roasted instantly. Haku died without pain because his nerves were fried shut before the signals reached his brain. The smoking corpse fell to the ground, and his eyes widened. Sasuke thought, I just killed someone. He shook his head. No, it was necessary. He got up and motioned to Shino, and they both ran toward Kakashi's location. They got there in time to see their sensei holding a fully charged lightning blade in his hand. Kakashi rocketed toward Zabuza, who struggled to get out of the way, but in vain. The blade pierced his heart and he slumped to the ground. The dogs holding him disappeared in puffs of smoke. Is he dead? Sasuke asked. Yes, but it was necessary. We had to complete the mission, and above all, I had to protect you for, Kakashi said, gesturing to Sakura and Ino, who were heading their way. Ino arrived first and looked at the body. Kaka-sensei, why did you kill him? Ino cried. Then Sakura arrived. Yeah, sensei, don't you know killing is wrong? Kakashi rounded on them. He picked bother of them up one-handed by the collar and said in a low threatening tone, Ino, Sakura, if you're going to continue being ninja, then I suggest getting that mentality out of your head. Shinobi are the equivalent of contract killers. We may do other jobs, but even many of those require us to kill. Sasuke added. When do you think they thought the vital spots in the academy, to miss them? And beside, I killed someone a minute ago. Does that make me a bad person? He asked. Sasuke-kun killed someone, was both Sakura and Ino's thought. It's not wrong of you, did it, Sasuke-kun, they said in stereo. Their crush worship was cut short by the sound of hundreds of footsteps. What do we have here? Came a nasally voice. The demon of the hidden mist, taken down by a gut with an odd hair and a bunch of brats. He continued. Well, now I have to pay them, and also you will surrender and leave the country, because I have her. The crowd of mercs that had just lined up behind Gato part to reveal Tsunami, and Inari bother held hostage and out cold. Tazuna shout, no, we'll leave, just don't hurt them. Tazuna began to walk away. Gato, I have a few matter I wish to discuss with you, came a hollow voice from the other side of the bridge. A figure walked through the still present fog. He stopped 10 yards from Team 7 and looked at Zabuza's body. His eyes flicked back to Gato, First, let's take care of your little entourage. Gato looked smug. Ha. Kid, I got over 300 mercs here, and you think beat all of them? Get him, Gato shouted. The mob lurched forward as one, and Naruto made 5 hand seals. Fire style. Wrath of the Sun. He shouted and fire erupted around him in an aura before he exhaled and launched a fireball 4 times the size of the one Sasuke used earlier. The aura combined with the fireball, and it doubled in size. Needless to say, all but a few of the mercs were incinerated. Lightning style. Chain lightning, and a bolt of lightning shot from his palm and hopped from one alive merc to the next, finishing off the crowd. Now that distractions are out of the way, hand over the boy and the woman or I'll kill you too, he said to the mercs, that last one's left, holding Inari and Tsunami. Both hire killers nearly soiled themselves, as they had already wet themselves, and let go of their hostages. They stumbled back, but were fried by a lightning bolt and a fireball. Team 7 snapped put of the days they had been in, and both Sakura and Ino shouted, "You said you wouldn't kill them." Naruto turned to face them, but not before placing a genjutsu on Gato to keep him from running. I didn't say I would kill them, I said I'd kill them if they didn't let go of those 2, he said, motioning to the 2 people Tazuna had run to when they were released. 2. I lied, Naruto finished with a chuckle. The other members of the team, on the other hand, had more self-control and didn't start shouting. Sensei, who is this man? Both Shino and Sasuke asked. Kakashi responded, he not a man, he's a boy, the same age as you, and his name is Uzumaki Naruto, S-class criminal. That proves it, all the people who have left their villages, Sasuke thought. He filed this away for further reference, before turning his attention back to Naruto. And you, Naruto said as he walked toward Gato, where's Orochimaru? I know you've had contact with him. He picked up Gato by the scruff of his neck. I don't no, He comes to find me, Gato chalked out. Worthless, I'm no closer to killing him than I was when he killed Sensei, he muttered, but it was picked up by Kakashi, Shino, and Sasuke. So he's an Avenger too, that must be where he got his strength, were Sasuke's thoughts on the matter. What Sensei? Kakashi thought. Guess who that came from? Naruto wrenched Gato up to head height, before he shot him with his most powerful genjutsu, Hell's Reality. Under this Gato would be tortured to death, it would take 5 hours to run its course, and it made the body believe what was happening and force it to simulate the effects, the mind makes it real. I don't own this line. Tossing Gato to the side, Naruto made his way to the newly reunited family of Inari, Tsunami, and Tazuna. They shrunk back when he approached. He reached into his cloak and extracted a piece of Pocky. Here kid, you need this. He handed it to Inari, who looked at it puzzled. I recommend you eat that, you're the first person I've ever given one away to. Inari hastily devoured the candy and a smile came over his face. The child satisfied, Naruto turned to his relatives. This time he unsealed the briefcases containing the stocks to Gato's companies. He then pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to Tazuna. It read, Tazuna, I am Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm here to offer you something. First, don't let the Leaf Ninja see this, I'm wanted in their village. Now in the 2 briefcases are the deeds to Gato's companies, all of them. Their income should be enough to bolster the wave's economy to a fair level, and you can reroute several trade routes to go through the wave to bring in needed products. The only thing I want in exchange is a safe haven where I can buy, sell and not be turned in. I'd also request you set up a bounty station, but that's just a request. Benefactor, Uzumaki Naruto. Tazuna showed the letter to his daughter, and she read through. They nodded to each other and then to Naruto. Naruto incinerated the paper, and promptly shushined out of the area. What just happened? Sakura asked. I don't know, Ino replied. Kakashi walked over to the 3 and asked, what did Uzumaki want, and what was on that paper? Tazuna replied, it was a deal. He gave us these briefcases that hold Gato's assets and we let him out of the wave with no hostility. Tazuna conveniently forgot to mention the other part of their deal. 2 days later, Tazuna's house. After saying their goodbyes, Team 7 left the land of waves, and headed back to the Leaf Village. They made it back without incident, and Kakashi immediately ran report to the Hokage. Hokage-sama, I'm back with my team, Kakashi stated as he walked into the Hokage's office. Anything unusual happen? The aging Kage asked. Kakashi chuckled. Where do I start? First, it turns out the bridge builder had a A-class nin after him, so it was upgraded to an A- rank. The Hokage paled at this. The ninja was Momochi Zabuza of the Mist. The Hokage grew ever further toward pure white. Though he ran into S-classed missing ninja Uzumaki Naruto. He continued to explain Gato's death and Naruto's deal. By this time Sarutobi was pale as a ghost. What did Naruto want? He asked. I don't know, but he gave all of Gato's shipping contracts as collateral for safe passage out. He also appeared to be looking for Orochimaru, something about a dead sensei, Kakashi stated. Kakashi left, but both of them continued to think over the boy's mysterious actions. Unknown location with Naruto. Naruto sat in the middle of a clearing. It's time to start our plan, Naruto thought. Agreed, came that hat's response. Naruto pulled off the hat and placed it on the ground. He bit his thumb and swiped the blood on the hat. He then painted several layers of seals on, and sped through 92 hand seals. He slammed his hand on the hat and tossed it in the air. Body clone technique, he called. The hat stopped at exactly Naruto's head height, and blue chakra began to pour from it. It slowly took the shape of a body Naruto's shape. Then flesh and blood began to form. 5 minutes later, a living breathing clone of Naruto was finished. The body clone takes a blood sample from the user, and then uses seal and chakra to form an exact copy of the user. It cannot be dispelled, but it can die. Normally the clone had no intelligence because people generally don't have two consciences. Naruto worked around this by using his hat as a replacement brain. They can share information via their already established link and have access to anything the other has on his person. I'll set up the spy network, the real Naruto said, and I'll acquire the new techniques, and hunt down some nuke nin for the bounties. Both of the Narutos sped off into the trees, but not before the first called. We meet in Konoha for the Chunin exams, as he tree-hopped away. 6 months later, a nondescript trader in a straw hat headed to the village from the north, while at the same time family of 4 reached the south gate of Konoha. Both were let in without incident, and both headed for the busier streets of the village. The trader walked into one of the Leaf's many back alleys, and the family followed after a few minutes. The tallest of the family spoke one word, Kai. The other members of the family disappeared in clouds of smoke. In their place stood a boy of about 13. He had blonde hair and striking blue eyes that had the look of a hardened warrior. The other man vanished in a poof of smoke, and there stood an exact replica of the first boy, except with a straw hat on. You made it, they spoke in stereo. They nodded to each other and the one with the hat took it off and handed it to the original Naruto. The original placed it on his head, and immediately knew what his clone had done for the past 6 months. Flashback. Naruto sat at a campfire, hat in hand, staring into the flames. He heard a slight rustling behind him, and turned to find a group of 4 people striding out of the forest. One was dressed like a samurai, with traditional armor and swords. Another looked like a standard ninja, with full face mask that left only the eyes exposed, and the regular black garb. The third looked to be no more than 17, he had black hair and green eyes. He wore the Konoha standard issue flak jacket, and black baggy pants with blue ninja sandals. The last of the group was covered in bandages from head to toe, all but his eyes were covered. He wore shinobi sandals and an Anbu cloak similar to Naruto's. The last one spoke first, Uzumaki Naruto? Naruto was feeling particularly sarcastic and responded, "No, he went that way," and gestured off into the forest. The one with black hair spoke, "Cut the crap, kid. We know it's you. Then why did you ask?" Naruto countered. The black-haired one scratched his head, and was smacked upside the head by another group member. Naruto decided he had had enough and looked over at the samurai one. He glared for a second before blasting him into ash. Though his armor survived the fire, all that was left of him was the charred remains in the basic shape of his body. All 3 of the others started to leap back to regroup, but the ninja was stuck through with a poison knife. Naruto tossed his body at the other 2 to follow with a wide area genjutsu that made objects seem to fly slower than they actually did. The body smacked the green-eyed group member and knocked him off balance. Naruto stuck another knife in him before he could react. The bandaged one sprang to another tree. He shouted, "You may have gotten the others, but I'm the best of all." Naruto smirked before jumping to a branch parallel to the other ninjas. He made 4 hand seals and whispered ninpo, corrosive fluid. The enemy didn't hear him and wonder what Naruto was making seals for. Naruto then sniffed up and hacked. Then he spat the loogie in his opponent's face. Gross, the bandaged man said before the fluid started to eat through his skin tissue. He collapsed screaming, before the acid reached his brain and shut it down. The Sakoshi group, Naruto thought. Their total bounty is equal to half of mine. This is a good way to get my name out there. He took out his camera and photoed the dead bodies so he could get credit for the kills. He then headed for the nearest bounty station. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Naruto, without a straw hat, was currently interrogating one of the top Anbu of the Village of Lightning. In this instance, interrogating meant restraining him until he couldn't move, then painting seals on him to enforce his will upon him. Don't worry, Naruto spoke to the Anbu in his monotonous voice, all the while munching on a stick of Pocky. It won't hurt much, Naruto chuckled. Finishing the seals, Naruto activated them with a one-handed seal. He asked the Anbu, "Who am I?" The ninja responded, "You are Naruto, my superior officer. I am to answer only to you." Naruto nodded, released the seals, then erased the shinobi's memory of the incident. Naruto left the village without trouble. On to the next one, he thought. He repeated this process in all of the shinobi villages. Anywhere that had a shinobi village or major trade center, he now had a spy network, albeit an unknowing one. Present time. Naruto, whole again, walked through the streets of Konoha. He was passing through one of the seedier districts, when he heard flamboyant laughter coming from inside one of the places of commerce, if they could be called that. He glanced inside and saw a tall man with 3 women on a couch next to him, and many alcoholic drinks on the table in front of him. The man himself had 3 features that easily identified him. One was the 2 red marks running down his face, the forehead protector with the symbol for oil, I think that's right, on his head. The last was the mane of white hair that ran down to the small of his back. Naruto sighed, the great Jiraiya of the Sannin reduced to that pathetically drunk man before him. Jiraiya looked up, still in a drunken stupor, and Naruto released the henge he had on his eyes. He nodded to the Sannin before continuing through town. He remembered the first time he met the ninja. It wasn't a very pleasant experience. Flashback. 4 months into the real Naruto's journey and he already felt he needed a break. He had been to all of the major cities on the continent over the past 4 months, and had worked hard in all of them. He was currently relaxing in a hot spring about 15 miles from the Leaf Village. He planned to hide out in villages like these for the next 2 months, and gather some info on the situation in the Leaf from here. He perked up as he was alone in the springs, or so he thought, when he heard the perverted giggling of a certain old man, outside the area he was in and next to the woman's spring. He threw a towel on and went to see who was disturbing his relaxation time. The only features he had changed were his whisker marks and his eyes, which were back to the blue they were before thanks to some genjutsu from himself. He reached the outside of the bath and saw the previously described old man peeking into the woman's side of the springs. "Hey, Aro Oji-san, perverted old man, don't you know it's rude to peek on a woman bathing?" He stated softly, trying to keep the hollow, creepy edge out of his voice as much as possible. "Bug off, Gaki, can't you see I'm working?" the old man said. Naruto snorted, "And what kind of work is peeking on a spring full of girls?" Naruto shot back. The old man turned around and Naruto finally got a good look at him. So this is Jiraiya of the Sannin, Naruto thought as he was just who he was dealing with. The kind of work for a writer of the great Icha Icha series, Jiraiya proclaimed, pulling out an orange book familiar to perverts everywhere. So the great Jiraiya has reduced himself to writing smut? Naruto asked. "It's not smut, it's fine literature," the Sannin responded. "Whatever," Naruto said, taking out a stick of Pocky. He began to munch in silence. Jiraiya's eyebrow began to twitch. Naruto continued to munch, until Jiraiya yelled, "Cut that out, brat, I'm trying research these the girls in there," gesturing to the hot springs. 3, 2, 1, Naruto counted mentally. "Pervert," came the scream from nearby. Naruto felt it was time to be gone and shushined to a safe location from which to watch the legendary Sannin be beaten half to death. After making a miraculous recover, Jiraiya sought out the brat who put him in such a predicament. He found him sitting on a bench munching on, you guessed it, a stick of Pocky. "Oi, brat, what's the big idea letting those girls know about me?" he shouted. Naruto cleaned his ear with his finger then said, "First, I didn't tell anyone, you shouted, and second don't shout it hurts my ears." "Brat, who do you think you are talking to me that way? You're just some no-name kid, most likely without any shinobi training. I'm Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, so don't talk down to me like you're superior." Jiraiya launched into his tirade. Naruto decided to let the Sannin know just who he was dealing with. He stood up, removing the genjutsu on his eyes and marks and dispelling the henge on his cloak. "Just who do you think you're talking to, old man?" Naruto asked. Jiraiya just gaped. "I'm your student's son you're talking down to, and I'm just as good as you if not better," Naruto stated casually, as if talking about the weather. Jiraiya got serious. "First kid, you're nowhere near my level, and I have to take you in for crimes against Konoha," he said. "What crimes?" Naruto asked. "You broke into the Hokage records," Jiraiya said. "I was looking for info on my parents. There's something wrong about an orphan looking for who he born to." "Alright, I'll give you that," the old hermit said. "So I won't bring you in, 1 because you're my student's son, and 2 you've really done nothing wrong." Naruto smirked at his victory. Then he asked, "Jiraiya-san, will you train me?" Jiraiya sputtered. "You want me to train you, a missing nin from the village?" "As a last favor to my father, and besides we're after the same goal," Naruto said. "Really, what that?" Jiraiya asked. Naruto's eyes flashed a deeper red. "The total and complete extermination of Orochimaru," Naruto growled. "Why do you want to kill Orochimaru?" Jiraiya asked. "He took something precious to me, and I'm going to take what's most precious to him, the eternal life he created," Naruto said. "Okay brat, I'll train you, but you have to show me something I can't do first," Jiraiya said. Now he had no chance of my training, he thought. Naruto made several hand seals before muttering, "Lightning style, apocalypse storm." A massive cloud rolled in overhead and cast down several hundred lightning bolts. Naruto kept them from damaging the surrounding forest, but it still left a mark on the landscape. Alright brat, you get my training," Jiraiya said dejectedly. He motioned for Naruto to follow and lead him into the surrounding fort. "I'm not going to teach you to summon frogs, as that would be too noticeable to our enemies. They can't know I had contact with you. And I can't teach you fire or lightning, so I'm going to teach you the Rasengan," Jiraiya said proudly. "I'll finally be able to pass on the technique. I hope you're happy, Minato," Jiraiya thought. In Jiraiya's wallet the picture of the fourth he kept around grin got a little wider. Jiraiya threw out a small water balloon and proceeded to explain the dynamics of the technique. He turned around to wait for a few hours, at least as long before Naruto got the first step down before there was a pop and a "Done, what's next?" from Naruto. Jiraiya grumbled about his loss of rest and went over the next step with him. This time it took 5 full minutes before he got it. "How the hell do you keep doing that?" Jiraiya asked. "Doing what?" Naruto said. "Mastering the steps. It took me 4 weeks to do that," Jiraiya said. "I don't know, I just see it," Naruto said. The real reason was Naruto's reader eye, which he could use genjutsu for. Genjutsu and medicine are considered the most difficult manipulations of chakra. With this constant exposure to highly focused chakra, Naruto soon subconsciously caught on to how chakra moved, which wasn't a big help, but used in a technique that was all about moving chakra. It was like a cheat book for it. This continued until Naruto mastered the move, approximately 15 minutes later. Naruto thanked Jiraiya for the training and called, "I'll be in touch, and I give you any information I think you need to know." Naruto headed into the woods to commence his stakeout of local towns. Present time. Naruto made his way out of the red light district, and found a modest hotel from which to conduct his operation. He unpacked nothing, because he kept everything sealed. He lay down to get some rest before nightfall, then the interesting part could begin. Halfway across the village, Team 7 minus Kakashi and Sasuke walked down the street talking about nothing in particular. Shikamaru rounded a corner, and bumped into a tall boy with that appeared to be makeup on his face. "Sorry," Shikamaru muttered. "Hey, that hurt, pineapple head," the makeup guy yelled. He reared back to punch Shika, but his fist was caught by a blonde-haired girl with 2 pigtails and a fan on her back. "Kankuro, it's not worth it, and beside what would Gaara do?" the girl said. "Gaara's not here, Tamari, and this brat needs to learn some respect," Kankuro spat. He pulled an object off his back that looked like a mummy with hair on top. "You're bringing it out for a street fight?" Tamari questioned. Kankuro swung to object around, but before he could reach the bandages, Shino pulled a knife to his throat, and Sasuke appeared with his hands in the tiger seal. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Sasuke said. Kankuro sneered, "Or what, leaf punks?" "Kankuro," a chilling voice said. A boy appeared in swirl of sand. He was shorter than the other two, but he radiated an aura of death and pain. He had an overly large gourd on his back and had deep shadows around his eyes. The kanji for love was tattooed on his forehead. "You're a pathetic excuse for a ninja. Stand down or I'll kill you," Gaara said menacingly. He turned to Team 7. "I'm sorry for their action. It won't happen again." He shot a glare at his siblings and motioned for them to follow. "What's your name?" Sasuke called. Gaara turned back to him. "I am Gaara of the desert. And what is your name?" "I'm Uchiha Sasuke," Sasuke responded. "I will enjoy feeding mother your blood," Gaara said before walking away. Sasuke took a step back, but Sakura didn't notice and began to stoke the Uchiha's already planet-sized ego. "That boy, he is similar to Uzumaki Naruto," Sasuke thought. He walked away to think over these new facts. That night, Naruto crept out of his hotel room, leaving no trace of his exit. He headed to the Chunin Final Exam Stadium and hopped up to the cage box. He placed several seals on the walls and ceiling. He then ripped a small bit of concrete off from an unnoticeable corner and stuck a sealed tag for his limited version of Hiraishin. Flashback. Naruto, without his, swore under his breath, "I can still only move 50 feet, and it takes 5% of my chakra to do it." "Shut up," his core of iron shot at him. "You've never given up before, why start now?" He smirked and went back to training. End flashback. He then went to the Forest of Death and placed similar tags throughout the forest. He shot past the guards around the hospital, and made his way to their storerooms. He burglared a good percentage of their soldier pills and chakra replenishing medicine. He then made his way to the living quarters of the team from the sand, and crept inside until he found Gaara's room. "Hello, Gaara," Naruto spoke before smashing through his sand shield and slapping a tag on his forehead. "Mother is quiet," Gaara said, shocked. "Yes, and I will make her silent forever if you agree to my terms. You will finally be able to sleep and control the spazzed-up raccoon at will," Naruto said. Gaara's face grew grim. "And what are your terms?" he asked. "Simple, one, you will leave the Sand Village directly after the invasion. Whether you follow me is your choice, but you must leave soon. Next you will proceed with your role in the invasion, and rampage through Konoha. Finally you will read over this scroll. The information on it is vital to your survival." "Akatsuki?" Gaara questioned. Naruto nodded. "Meet me at the top of the Hokage monument tomorrow. Anytime. I'll be there." Naruto vanished in a plume of smoke, leaving Gaara to ponder his new revelations. Hokage office. "Naruto, what are you up to this time?" The Hokage said to no one in particular. He noticed the imperceptible blurs of Naruto's movement around the village. The next day, the village of Konoha awoke that morning to a beautiful sunrise, but anyone who actually mattered didn't really care. The ninja of the village awoke to another day packed with tense situations, combat drills, and of course the Chunin exams. Uzumaki Naruto awoke with a smile, knowing his plans were about to be set in motion. He created a shadow clone and sent it to the place of too many faces to wait for Gaara. When the clone saw Gaara approaching, it would create another clone and release itself. Naruto would perform a long-range replacement with the second clone, which took much less chakra than his Hiraishin, but couldn't be done on the fly because it took too much concentration. He then walked his way to the exam center. There he disguised himself as a light bulb to watch the test. Sometime later, after several hours, the room was moderately filled with Chunin hopefuls. Minutes later, Team 7 arrived. Sasuke, fresh from his one-sided slaughter with Lee, and the team's first meeting to the slightly eccentric Guy Sensei, was a little shaken up. The rookies engaged in the usual banter minus Shino, before a silver hair participant walked over and calmed them. He caught Sasuke's words over the general conversation. "What information do you have on Rock Lee, Hyuga Neji, and Uzumaki Naruto?" Kabuto replied, "Rock Lee, 1 year older than you, no nin or genjutsu, but his hand-to-hand is off the chart. Not surprising since his sensei is the village's top taijutsu master. Hyuga Neji, same team as Lee, he specializes in the Hyuga's gentle fist. I don't have any other stats for him." Their team had done 24 D-rank missions, and 8 C-rank missions. Uzumaki Naruto, I don't have much on him, just what it says in the bingo book. He is a master of. Kabuto was cut off by the card igniting. Kabuto dropped the card and yelped. Everyone else jumped back. What the hell, was the general thought. Moving past that, Kabuto said before the examiner appeared in the room. The test went smoothly. Team 7 cheated by using Shino's bugs to spill out the information on Shikamaru's desk, then having him shadow possess Sakura. He wrote down the answers on Sakura's desk while Sasuke used his Sharingan to copy her. It worked and they and 22 other teams passed. Then Anko burst into the room shouting about the second exam. Naruto's sweat dropped, though he had no idea how, as he was still a light bulb. He smirked mentally. He had gained new information on the genin of this test, though he almost got caught by 10-10 when she placed the mirrors right next to his position. He saw the teams exit and Gaara head toward the monument. He replaced himself with the clone and waited for Gaara to arrive. "I'm here," came Gaara's dead voice. "Now, can you stop my mother from torturing my dreams?" Naruto nodded. "Where's your seal?" Naruto asked. "My left shoulder," came the answer. Naruto instructed Gaara to take his arm out of his shirt. He did, and Naruto whipped out a seal tag, made 6 heels and slapped it on Gaara's seal. Fuin. Sealing circuit. This seal would contain the demon's chakra inside his body by constantly running it back through the seal. This was necessary to keep Shukaku from being released while he put Gaara under for the process. He then struck Gaara's neck, and let him down softly, and pulled out his pot of chakra ink. He examined Gaara's seal and frowned. Suna really has some crappy seal masters, he thought. The seal on Gaara was barely better than the simplest 5-point seal used to contain demonic chakra. He began painting 2 more seals around the first, one to reroute the demon's influence back upon itself. So every time he tried to send Gaara nightmares or force his mind on him with his permission, it would force it back on itself. So like a lab rat, it would learn not to hurt itself. The next seal was a 6-point seal to bring the strength of his seal to 11 points. Each point would drain the potential harm of the chakra controlled by the demon to 1/11 of its strength. The chakra could only affect Gaara if he let it, and even though would be reduced in potency to keep his mind safe. He pressed his hand on the seal and forced his energy into to kick-start the operation of the seal. He picked up Gaara and transported him to his hotel with a note. It simply read, "Remember our deal?" The remaining genin were lined up outside the 44th Battle Training Ground. Some were nervous like the rookies, some were bloodthirsty like Gaara, and some had a scary look to them, like the genin from the grass. Anko explained the test, then sent them off to get their scrolls. 10 minutes later, everyone was lined up in front of the entrances. Soon after, everyone was released into the forest, and Team 7 began their trek toward the tower. 20 minutes in, howling started. Then, a few seconds later, a great wind burst blew through the team's location. Sasuke jumped to the left, Sakura got clipped, and Shino simply dispersed into bugs, but Shikamaru got hit full force. He went flying, but managed to snag a branch. Sakura ran over to Sasuke. Shino appeared on his left. Sasuke whirled around and asked, "What did I ask you yesterday, Shino?" Shino's response was, "Good, real Shino." Shikamaru walked up, and Sasuke turned to him. "Shikamaru, what is this test?" The pineapple-haired ninja replied with a lazy look, "Troublesome." Sasuke nodded, and reached down to put his knife away, when he and his team froze. "So, you survived, Sasuke," came an unfamiliar voice that sounds strangely like hissing. "I hoped you would, it should make this much more fun." The voice came again from the left and the team mustered the strength to look over in that direction. Standing on the edge of the clearing, slightly hidden by the trees, was the grass ninja they noticed had an aura of malignancy about her. The supposed genin spoke again. "I suppose you won't be moving for a while, so I'll have fun finishing you off." The ninja pulled out 4 kunai, and brought his hands forward to throw them. Other edge of the clearing. Naruto had watched the proceedings with a lazy eye, discussing various things with his hat, until the grass ninja showed up. His eyes saw through the horrific disguise Orochimaru wore. He saw the knives Orochimaru pulled out, and knew he had to do something. "I guess we have to reveal ourselves soon than we thought," Naruto said to his hat. The hat sent him the mental equivalent of a nod and said, "Yes, but if we can weaken Orochimaru now, we may have a better chance to fight him later. We may even get to try out new technique." Naruto thought back as he jumped from the tree he was perched on. Back with Team 7, the implements of death began their path toward the paralyzed Team 7. They stopped halfway through, caught by a boy the same age as the team. The boy spoke only one word, Orochimaru, before fire began to burn in a small circle around him. Orochimaru chuckled, "You think you can take me, brat, at your age?" Naruto gave no response, unless expanding fire counts as a response. "So, who are you, insect?" Orochimaru asked. "Did you remember Kogastu?" Naruto asked. "It was his dying wish that you fall," Orochimaru laughed. "So you think that a few lessons qualifies you fight me?" "No, but this does." Fire style. Burning sun path. A stream of fire burst from the ground and encircled Orochimaru. Orochimaru replaced himself with a mud clone, and hid in the trees. Naruto gestured and the clone vaporized. The fire dissipated and Naruto sighed. "So you're going to play it like that," he said. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a box of Pocky. He started to work his way through the selection of flavors. Team 7 got over the killing intent directed at them. The then began to sweat drop, then the sweat drop grew until it outweighed their heads. He finished the box and pulled out the next one. At this point Team 7 had face planted so hard that, if it hadn't been animation they would need plastic surgery. Orochimaru continued to sit in the tree. He too sweat dropped. "Fine, brat," he thought, "I'll give you your shot at your petty little revenge." He blurred into view 10 feet from Naruto, with his "I'm a crazy pedophile beware" grin on his face. "Damn, now I can't finish my Pocky," Naruto said as he stowed his snack in his cloak. The Pocky-addicted ninja glanced at Orochimaru before both flashed out of view. "Sasuke?" Sakura asked from the sidelines. "Can you see them, Sasuke?" Sharingan active, shook his head. "No," he replied. "All I see is faint blurs. How can they be that fast, that much better? I'm an Uchiha. I deserve that kind of power," Sasuke thought to himself. Back on the battlefield, both fighters reappeared, and Orochimaru still had his signature smirk. "I'm superior to you, brat, just give in and I'll let you join me," he said. Naruto rolled his eyes, an odd gesture, since his eyes had that weird color. He then proceeded to extract his box of Pocky, and start munching on his main food source. 3 sticks of Pocky later Orochimaru was seething that someone would dare ignore him, Orochimaru, of the legendary Sannin. 7 sticks of Pocky later Orochimaru, a person of 50, had dangerously high blood pressure, though the reason was a mystery because he was in a body that was most likely in its late 20s. 11 sticks of Pocky later, Naruto finished that box and pulled out another. Orochimaru on the other hand was dangerously close to a stress-related heart attack. Team 7 was silently snickering. Orochimaru decided he had had enough and began to make seals. "It's time for you to join your master," he said as he finished on the snake seal. He inhaled and spat out a large python. "You'll be seeing my master far sooner than I will," Naruto shot back as he began to gather a Rasengan in his right hand, and make one-handed seals with his left. He pressed the spiraling ball of chakra into the snake face and introduced it to the ground hard. He then inhaled and held his breath for a second, then vented his built-up energy through his pores. This created a desert effect in the immediate vicinity. With little moisture in the air to keep it cooled down in the forest environment, and the heat Naruto produced air began to rise. Let the cooler air around it rush in and power Naruto's next technique. Orochimaru meanwhile stood confidentially in the same spot until the wind rushed in, and he saw Naruto forming more hand seals. "Fire style. Flaming Star God technique," he stated in a clear voice. "This is going to take at least half of my total stamina," he thought, for a stamina freak like Naruto. Just think about it. Naruto slammed his palm into the ground. Orochimaru looked down, expecting some form of ground attack. He had never heard of the technique before and took a second to remember and memorize the seals needed. After all, you can't have all the techniques in the world, without all the techniques in the world. While he gazed at the ground, Orochimaru saw the small shadow he cast grow to sunset time length. He turned on his heel, and saw a huge flaming meteor heading straight for the clearing he was standing in. He glanced around to see Naruto had left and Team 7 had fled the area. He began to the seals for the mud clone, but the meteor slammed into the ground the feet from him. He survived, but barely. The resulting explosion wiped out the surrounding 2 miles, killing 4 genin teams in the process and wounding another. Naruto was only a few hundred yards outside the blast area, and the air shock wave blew him backward, but his healing factor took care of it. That won't kill him, but it will buy me some time, he thought, as he gathered chakra for Hirashin. He teleported to the tower and hid in a supply closet. He then took out a sealed tag and swiped some blood on his hand. He sealed himself in between 2 of his chakra tags for the next 4 days. That way he would have some time to recover and think. He passed out halfway through and only made it through the sealing process because his hat took temporary control over his body. Stasis area. So human, you have finally come for a visit, came a voice from down the hall. Wait, hall? Naruto thought. He spoke aloud. Where am I? Then his instincts kicked in and he surveyed the area. He was in a sewer-like hallway with water up to his ankles. Pipes ran overhead and a foul stench radiated from somewhere. Last I remember I put myself in stasis to recover. He spoke to no one in particular. That voice, never heard anything like that before. Then it clicked. Crap, Kyuubi, he groaned. Well, I'd better see what the puffed-up wannabe Godzilla wants. He set off for the locate from which the voice originated. He arrived in a larger room than the hallway with a huge cage on the opposite end. He approached the cage, and the 9-tailed demon fox came into view. The fox was enormous, and grinning with the creepy, "I'll eat you alive," grin. So what do you need, human? The Kyuubi said contemptuously. I didn't come here on purpose, furball, Naruto shot back. Insolent, mortal, do you know of whom you speak? Kyuubi roared. Of course, I'm speaking to a arrogant fuzzball stuck in my stomach. Kyuubi thrashed against the cage walls at this. Naruto rolled his eyes. Then he sensed another presence in the room. He turned to find an exact replica of himself. Drawing the obvious conclusion, he said, Yohat. The replica responded, not bad. Naruto smirked, glad to have an ally, and turned back to the 9 tails. So, Fox, what do you want, or am I wasting my time? Naruto began. Mortal, you will show me the proper respect. I am the great 9-tailed demon fox, Kyuubi shouted. Naruto scowled. Listen up, fuzzball. Your ego is not going to get you anywhere in my body, so you will be the one to show me the proper respect. Now, whether you like it or not, you're stuck in here, and I'm stuck with you. So arrogance will only make your life worse. Kyuubi was an arrogant creature by nature. That much power entitles him to some, but he could realize that he would have to be a little more cooperative if he wished to get out of this sewer. He also knew that he was outnumbered, 2 minds to 1, and that the second mind had much more influence over the boy than he did. Naruto continued, the way I see it, we have to work together, to make a better life for both of us. You might even get to go free before I die if you cooperate. Kyuubi pondered his situation for several minutes, reviewing his lifetimes of knowledge on humans, and the brat's offer for escape. He weighed this against his several plans to break out of the kid's seal. Several possible opportunities for escape, considering the kid's power that of a 3, almost 4-tailed demon, and his own power that was constrained by that blasted seal. This against a almost ironclad promise of escape, several years or maybe a decade or 2 later. Kyuubi knew the kid would live a very long time, even without his help, or any trick for immortality, but with him he could live nearly forever, and being stuck in here for centuries didn't appeal to him. He was a trickster by nature and might be able to escape sooner than expected if he could convince the brat. Alright insect, what do you want? Kyuubi said after several more minutes had passed. What can you offer me? Asked Naruto. I have thousands of years of knowledge not being put to use, Kyuubi stated. Why don't we start there? There are several fire techniques I know that will work well with those eyes of yours, and since you have a taste for unusual skills, many years before my assault on the leaf, I fought a ninja almost on level with 7 tails of my power. His main weapon was wires. Of course, I burned his home and destroyed his body, but I have a very good memory, and I got a look at some of his scrolls before I ate him. Wires? Naruto asked. Nay, wire could augment my fire and lightning techniques. It could as provide some interesting tactical advantages. So, how does this wire style work? Kyuubi? The idea was fairly simple, but the way he used them was ingenious. He attached the wire to a mechanism in a pair of gloves. Those of you who have watched Hellsing know what I'm talking about. The wire could be controlled with simple finger movement, and could be released from the glove if necessary. Naruto considered this for a moment, then nodded his head in acceptance. So now we need to find a way for you to talk to me directly, so you can train me on the outside. At this the hat piped up. I believe I have a way, it started. Normally this would be impossible, because, during my inspection of the seal, Kyuubi's chakra cannot leave in large quantities, and Naruto's chakra cannot directly affect the seal. I believe this was done to keep Naruto from releasing Kyuubi by accident, but if we use an outside force, like me, we could use the seal as a third point to triangulate, so that each point can talk to each other point. So, Kyuubi could talk to us, because I can talk to both of you. My chakra is a go-between. Naruto's eyes widened slightly and he nodded. Okay, he spoke, 3 things. 1. How long will it take to set up the process? 2. How long have we been in here? And 3. Why are you being so helpful, Kyuubi? Kyuubi spoke, the way the situation presents itself to me. The sooner you accomplish whatever you need to, the sooner I get out of here. I figure if all goes well, I might be free in 20 years max. Naruto commented, the only way you'll get out is if I'm stronger than you, so you can't overpower me on the outside, so don't get too hopeful. Kid, you're human, humans have to work for their power, demons are born naturally strong, and rarely grow that much in power, they just get better with it. Humans, though, have almost unlimited growth potential, they might have to work for their power, but it grows at a rate a demon could never hope to match. The man with the wires, who could match 7 tails, was barely 21. You're 13, about to hit the biggest growth spurt of your life. Your power could double or almost triple by the time you get to be 19, Kyuubi explained. Naruto pondered this new factoid. They pulled out a box of Pocky, from who knows where. The hat spoke, the process will take a day to set up and another to fully work, and we've been in here for 16 hours. Naruto wasn't fazed by this, as time would logically moving slower, because his mind had much more to process. Just this representation of his mind must slow everything by about half speed, then he had to heal, and maintain chakra while in stasis. Alright, well it looks like we have some time on our hands, Naruto said as he pulled up a chair, it's his mind, and sat down in front of the cage. The hat walked off to start the process. Naruto sighed, this was going to take a long time. Meanwhile, Team 7 stumbled into their room at the central tower 12 hours after their encounter with Orochimaru and Naruto. All of them were breathing hard, but Shino and Sasuke were concealing it fairly well. Shikamaru thought it was too troublesome to try to stop. Sakura was dead on her feet. At least we have 3 days recover, was the general agreement among the team. 2.5 days later, Naruto, now out of stasis, crept out of the supply closet he had originally hid in. He proceeded to the quarters of one of the Anbu in the tower. He cut the ninja's throat, burned the body. He took the mask, and since his cloak was already identical, he hooked his other mask on the inside of the cloak and put on the stolen one. He had to wait 11 hours to move from the room. He worked his way past all the genin into the Chunin exam preliminary testing room. It was extremely tall and fairly wide. It had a board on the opposite wall from Naruto, and 2 giant hands holding a seal. Naruto moved to the empty spot. Naruto to the Hokage. After standing for another 30 minutes, the last of the genin arrived and the Hokage explained rules of the test. They were simple. You fight until one of you is dead, knocked out, or the ref calls the match. At this point a sickly man with a standard Chunin vest and bandana appeared, and took over the situation. He gestured to the board and indicated it would decide who they fought. They decide the first match, Sasuke versus one of Kabuto's teammates. The teammate was roasted by Sasuke before the first 30 seconds were over. Next round, Shino versus Zaku. During the fight, Naruto, barely a foot from the Hokage, dropped a small slip of paper to the third without the other Anbu noticed. Sarutobi read the note and grew pale. The note read, "Old man, I am Naruto, if you react noticeably to this note the room will be detonated, everyone here will die. I mean no harm here, I simply wish to observe. You should also know that Orochimaru is on the right catwalk posing as a sound sensei. Do not react to this either, he will step up his plans. He will attack Konoha on the day of the Chunin exam finals, after Sasuke's match. He also plans to mark Sasuke with his curse seal. I stopped him in the forest, but I can't guarantee there won't be a next time. Know that I am not acting on Konoha's best interests, but my own desire to see Orochimaru terminated. Uzumaki, Namikaze, Naruto. Naruto, still incognito, gave his head a slight nod in the direction of a certain Junin sensei, then used his eyes to send a simple genjutsu that would display words in front of someone's eyes. He hit Gaara with it, and sent him, "Gaara, this is Naruto, do not react, just watch. When you fight, do not kill your opponent if he is from sound. You may maim or kill, but as a show of good faith to the Leaf, we will not kill their shinobi. Your partner in crime, Uzumaki Naruto." Gaara gave the slightest of nods, and looked back at the fight, but his mind was somewhere else, remembering when he agreed to join Uzumaki. Flashback. 2 days after Naruto fixed Gaara's seal, Naruto sat at the top of the Hokage monument. The real one, not a clone. Gaara appeared in a swirl of sand. "Uzumaki, I have decided that I will go with you when I leave my village. You are obviously strong, and I will get to fight strong people to prove my existence." Naruto sighed. "Gaara, why do you want to verify your existence? It is the only way I feel alive, that I am still worth something in the world." Naruto nodded to signify that he understood how he felt. "Then I will help you prove your existence to the world." He stood and held out his hand. Gaara recoiled slightly. "Why do you hold your hand out?" he asked, because in his experience the only reason someone would hold out their hand would be to strike at him. Naruto could understand why Gaara would do so, but decided he would have to make him more open to human interaction in order to blend in. "It's called shaking hands. It signifies our agreement to each other's words," Naruto said. Gaara tentatively extended his hand and shook Naruto's. "I'll keep you informed about what is going on," Naruto said. Then he disappeared in a poof of smoke, followed by Gaara and his sand. Present time. Both Naruto and Gaara turned their attention back to the fight where Shino had just finished off Zaku. Naruto decided that the fights weren't worth watching much more, so he began to meditate underneath his mask. He retained enough awareness to know the final matches went like this: Sasuke vs Gaara, Kiba vs Neji, Shino vs Kankuro, Shikamaru vs Tamari. He waited as the Hokage explained the Chunin exam purpose. Substitute for war blah blah blah, political impressions blah blah blah. As soon as it was over the Hokage started to leave, both Naruto and Orochimaru disappeared. Orochimaru to who knows where, and Naruto to his hotel. He had a month to train, and he wasn't going to waste it. Summary of 1 month. The first week Naruto headed to the Forest of Death to work on his wire skills and the fire techniques. With Kyuubi's help, and several thousand shadow clones, Naruto had wires down to an acceptable level. He stayed in the forest for 3 weeks working on taijutsu and several of his own originals. He drew from Kyuubi's centuries of knowledge to add to his repository of hand-to-hand styles. He never actually mastered the styles to the highest degree, but he mixed the best elements of each one. He also placed 3 more seals on his body so he could convert his chakra into all 5 base elements but to a lesser degree than fire. He also began work his own seal that would actually pull small pieces of space out of the normal phase of the universe. It could then be moved to any spot within the natural gravity of Earth. It wasn't complete yet, but he was making progress. The last week, he sought out Jiraiya and blackmailed by threatening to burn his research, him into teaching him more about the Rasengan. He learned about the Rasengan's status as an incomplete technique, and practiced with several thousand shadow clones on adding fire and wind to it. The results were interesting. He created Spiral Sun technique, which burned almost as hot as the black fire of the Sharingan. He also came up with Gale Force Spiral, which hit like his Rasengan, but expanded into many thousands of wind blades in the shape of a sphere. Both of these were unstable and could cause harm to him if he lost his concentration. During this time he also sent a squad of 16 clones to research medicine. He needed to figure out how to extend to pieces of the cells in his body that control how many times a cell could replicate. If he could complete this project, he could use his healing factor as an advantage in battle instead of worrying that it was shortening his lifespan. For a normal person, no matter how long their cells last, their body would simply not be able to produce the chakra necessary to live. For Naruto, however, he had the largest chunk of raw chakra in existence, and it was doubtful that he would run out anytime soon. Research and training done, Naruto headed out to put his plans into motion. Chunin Exam Stadium. Naruto took a seat in the stadium. Cloaked in many layers of genjutsu, he looked exactly like a normal civilian should. He even distorted his chakra signature. He waited until the first match started, then got up as if to go to the bathroom. He passed behind an Anbu standing above the seats, and as he passed, he pulled the Anbu around to face him and activate his mind seal. The Anbu's eyes unfocused and Naruto led him around the corner. Now, Naruto questioned, "What is the plan for stopping the invasion?" The other ninja responded, "We have already evacuated civilians outside the stadium. When the invasion begins we will let them in the village, then unconceal ourselves and hit them with a pincer movement." Naruto nodded. "Now, does Konoha know the location of Orochimaru?" The Anbu shook his as in a negative. "One final question, what is the village's stance on Uzumaki Naruto?" The Anbu sighed and looked down. He told Naruto of the previous council meeting. Flashback. Sandaime Hokage of Konoha was slumped in his seat, amongst the chaos that was the Leaf Village Council. It was 2 hours after the Chunin preliminaries, and the council was demanding they send ever Hunter Nin available after the Demon Child. Sarutobi sighed in wonder what these closed-minded fools had done to get on a council that was supposed to be impartial. Abruptly he stood and shouted, "Quiet! Now! First we can't send Hunter Nin after Naruto, while Orochimaru is in the village." Apparently this was news to the council because they went into another uproar. "Shut up," he yelled again. A random member piped up, "What proof do have Hokage-sama?" "Naruto told me," he replied simply. Before they could shout about the demon's plots and dirty tricks, the third said, "Also, there is a 2-mile radius where Naruto claims to have fought him, and in the area we have found charred snakeskin, and the area itself was completely disintegrated by an unknown fire techniques, which Naruto is a known user of." Several of the more prominent clan heads nodded, have dealt with situations like this before and understood its significance. The Hyuga clan head spoke, "So we have 2 S-class missing nin in the village, one operating alone, the other planning an invasion with a hidden village." Hiyashi continued as he had read the situation report. "One appears to be at least moderately helpful to the village, as he saved the last Uchiha from Orochimaru. So if we can have a small level of cooperation with him it may be beneficial to us in the future." There was instant disagreement from the rest of the council, because they couldn't look past their hate and see a possible advantage when it walked up and told it was an advantage. The third sighed as the council meeting continued pointlessly as no agreement could be reached. "Sometimes I wonder why I still lead this village," he said to himself. Flashback over. Naruto stood still for a moment, processing this new info. Then he deactivated the mind seal and disappeared before the Anbu could sense him. The ninja returned to his post, and Naruto sent a clone to take his seat. The first 2 matches were already over. The Hyuga kid kicked the crap out of Kiba, and Kankuro had surrendered to Shino. Sasuke was having a ridiculous amount of favoritism shown toward him. They had decided to postpone his match and Naruto observed Shikamaru force Temari into a trap. He made a mental note to watch out for him if he ever got some motivation. He watched as Shikamaru gave up when his chakra ran out. Sasuke showed up just before his match was cancelled, with his lazy sensei, which explained his tardiness. Gaara appeared in the arena, and the signal was given for the fight to start. Sasuke charged at once, and managed to make it past Gaara's shield with pure speed, but when he went to strike him, he found that Gaara had done some training of his own. He replaced himself with a large piece of sand, which then shot spikes at Sasuke. Sasuke retreated and Gaara appeared on the other side of the field, and proceeded to spread sand in a circle around himself. Sasuke charged again, this time using a grand fireball clear the way in front of him. Gaara's sand contained the fire, but it gave Sasuke a chance to get around behind Gaara. Gaara whirled bring his sand with him. He lashed out, sending waves of sand in Sasuke's direction. Sasuke retreated again, this time up the wall of the arena. "Looks like it's time to bring out my secret weapon." He ran through 5 seals, and grabbed his right wrist with his left hand. Lightning started to spark, and after a few seconds electricity blossomed in his hand in the form of a glowing white ball. Lightning arced in all directions around him. He charged Gaara who put his toughest sand wall in front of him. The glowing ball tore through the sand like paper. Sasuke shouted the name of the technique, Chidori. For Gaara, as the ball tore through his sand, straight toward him he made a split-second decision and pulled his sash that held his gourd up. It dropped and Gaara switched himself with a piece of his sand wall. Sasuke ripped the gourd in half, But Gaara used this to his advantage by forming the sand around Sasuke's arm. He then wrapped part of it around his leg. It spread around Sasuke's body in less than 2 seconds. "Proctor," Gaara said, "call the match, he will no be able to get out, and I don't feel like killing him." The new examiner Genma nodded and raised his hand to call the match when an explosion went off in the cage booth. The cage appeared on top of the booth while the third in a headlock, kunai to his neck. Sound Shinobi appeared amongst the crowd. A genjutsu put all weak or non-ninja to sleep, while on the edge of the village, a large three-headed snake smashed through the city wall, followed by various sound and sand shinobi. Naruto dispelled his genjutsu, and body flickered to the arena floor to where Gaara was. He motioned for Gaara to follow. He grabbed Gaara's arm and harashined to the cage booth, 10 feet from the sandame. "Gaara, hide here, and transform. Then take out as many sound shinobi as possible, and feel free to have some accidental leaf casualties," he said with a smirk. He then jumped to the top of the box, while Gaara formed his sand sphere. He saw the Sound 4 about to put up the barrier, and body flickered toward the Hokage. He appeared just as the barrier reached head height. The cage had just peeled off his face and showed that he was Orochimaru. The Hokage got free and jumped back. Naruto appeared beside him. "Old man," he greeted. Naruto," the third stuttered out, "why are you here?" Naruto responded, "I'm here for Orochimaru. He took my master from me, and I'm taking his life from him," he stated in monotone. The Hokage simply nodded. Orochimaru looked from the sandame to Naruto. "So you're joining back with Konoha, brat?" Naruto moved his head in a negative. "I'm just here for you, you need to die." Orochimaru scowled, angry that none of his jibes ever worked on this kid. "Well, we'll see how you face off against your predecessors, old sensei." Summoning. "Forbidden World Resurrection," he yelled as 3 coffins rose out of the ground. They had the kanjis for first, second, and fourth on the center. Naruto appeared in front of the one that said first, and slapped a disruption seal that would mix up the chakra used to power the technique. The third threw several kunai at the one that said fourth. The door still opened but nothing came out. Naruto back next to the third, laugh. "Have you grown so arrogant that you would think that you can overpower the death god himself? Now the playing field is even. 2 S-level shinobi on each side." Orochimaru seethed that some stopped his technique. He had only summoned the Naidame, who was barely an S-rank shinobi in the first place. He spat out the long sword of the heavens. Naruto smirked and put on the gloves that contained his wires. Orochimaru inserted the knife needed to control the second. The third summoned Enma, the Monkey King, as if by some unseen signal everyone moved. The second made several hand seals, and create a moderate-sized wave that headed for the third. The third jumped over and used Fire Dragon Flame Missile on Naidame. Naruto used one of his hands to throw his wires toward Orochimaru, then used Fire Dragon technique to blast fire down his glove and set the wires aflame. Naidame dodged and used a water technique to put out Naruto's wires, while Orochimaru charged Sarutobi with his long sword. Naruto decided this had to end fast or the old man would run out of steam too fast. Naruto threw out a basic fireball with no seals then a Harashin kunai. He then gathered his spiraling sun in his hand. Naidame put out the fireball and dodged the kunai by a few inches, then began forming hand seals, but Naruto appeared behind him using Harashin and slammed his technique into his back. The spiral effect ripped the matter the body was made of away from the sacrifice body used for it. The heat from the ball vaporized the sacrifice, already in a vulnerable state. The entire episode only took 12 seconds, but in the ninja world, 12 seconds is a long time. As he turned he saw 2 things. One was a huge raccoon-dog hybrid burst into the stadium terrorizing everyone. Then second was a glowing sword enter Sarutobi's body half an inch below the heart. Orochimaru laughed the whole time, but the third was dead yet. In his last-ditch effort the third Hokage slammed his staff, Enma, into Orochimaru's face. He flew back toward the burning barrier, but stopped himself several feet from it. Unfortunately for him Naruto moved right in front of him with his hands in a strange seal. The look on his face was pure murder, even if it could be seen through his mask. He stated in cold monotone, demonic fire style, Hellfire Fox. A fox made completely of white fire erupted from Naruto's body and slammed into Orochimaru, who was blasted through the barrier, mangled but still barely alive. He used that last of his strength to shed his skin, and heal a small portion of his injuries so at least he had all his limbs, even if they were burned almost beyond repair. Naruto was exhausted. Demon skills used a lot of chakra, because he didn't have large amounts of demonic chakra because of the seal, so he had to use regular chakra which was half as potent. He called to Gaara, and stomped over to him in Tanuki form. He explained what had happened and said, "We have to leave now." Gaara reverted to semi-human and picked up Naruto. Naruto directed him to a safe house several miles outside Konoha. Orochimaru motioned for the Sound Four to collect him and retreat. The invasion was partially successful, as about half of the village had been ruined in the fighting, but the Leaf still stood strong with most of its shinobi intact. Back at the said house, Kyuubi said a few words as Naruto passed out. "Not one of your better days, is it, kid?" "Ah," Naruto groaned as he sat up. "What the hell happened to me?" he asked himself. "Oh yeah, I fought 2 cage-level opponents, used my best technique, and suffered chakra exhaustion, and had my ass dragged to a safe house." "Shut up," came a cold voice from across the house. "I was sleeping," Gaara called. "Damn, I really have to stop monologuing," he thought to himself. He rolled off the futon that he stocked the house with, and threw his cloak around himself. He slept with his mask and hat on, and he kept everything on that was under his cloak. A ninja must always be ready, he had reasoned to himself. Under his cloak he wore black cargo pants, black combat boots, with a t-shirt then Anbu vest that had a trauma plate in the front and in back so he couldn't be killed by a stray shot to the back. He had used genjutsu skills to make it seem that the back and side of his he were covered in shadows, that way everything not covered by his hunter mask could be seen. It was an effective way to conceal his presence, and if he took off his hat he could pass for a regular Anbu operative. One might call Naruto paranoid, given the extreme measures Naruto had taken to keep his face concealed, and that person would be right. Naruto had an almost textbook case of paranoia, with good reason. Be chased down almost every day of your life since you were 4, you too would be paranoid. His measures extended in other ways as well. Naruto kept a log of his original techniques, but that log was written in a code no one but him could decipher, as it was written in a language only spoken by him. The safe house he was currently at was purchased through a dummy company, which, if investigated, would lead to a person that didn't exist. If you tried to find the one who sold the house, you would be looking 6 feet under. Everyone who knew of the house's location had been disposed of, their records burned, and the company that made detailed maps of the area's office had been broken into, and their maps altered. The house itself was then booby-trapped, stocked full of non-perishable food, and then sealed to bend the light around it. It wasn't invisible, but its outline was barely visible, and impossible to see from a distance. Back inside previously mentioned house, Naruto had made breakfast for himself, and when Gaara asked about it his response was, "You have hands, don't you?" Naruto knew he needed to make his next move soon, but with a completely untrained Gaara sitting around, he could risk exposing himself. So he had decided to re-educate Gaara starting from the ground up. After Gaara finished his breakfast, which was a complete disaster, several shadow clones were sent to clean up. Naruto escorted Gaara to the house's training area, which included weapons bay, technique library, and open area sparring section. Naruto was uncertain how to begin Gaara's re-education as he did not interact with people on a personal level much anymore. He decided it was best if he was as straightforward as possible to expedite the process. This proved to be the wrong choice as Gaara did not like being told he was not ready for the operations Naruto had in mind. He did also not take well to being told he couldn't threaten to kill someone just they didn't meet his standards. Before, if something displeased him he destroyed it, be it a person, animal, or object. Now he was being told he would have to keep valuable contacts in Naruto's information network alive. Naruto also decided that since he and Gaara would be working together for some time, they should start to learn to trust each other in a combat situation. Naruto tried to think up some kind of training method to do this, but as stated before, Naruto was not very skilled in social interactions. For that matter, neither was Gaara, as he too had spent high life isolated from so-called normal society. Both eventually agreed just to ask questions about each other that they thought might give them a better idea of their capabilities. Naruto's first question was, "So what is the extent of your control over your sand?" Gaara's response was, I can mold it into any shape I see fit, cause it to float or delve underground. It can be hardened, but this takes a considerable amount of chakra. I have several techniques you have not seen with it, such as my sand armor, sand cannon, and shield of Shukaku. Naruto nodded, then gestured for Gaara to go, and Gaara asked, "What exactly are your eyes? I have not come across a Dujutsu, eye technique, such as that before." "That's because it's not a bloodline, it is self-created chakra-regulating device," Naruto answered. "A what?" Gaara asked. Naruto sighed, he had forgotten that not all people had a seal master's education. "I created these eyes from my own chakra, and so they mold my chakra into a specific form, which the seals I used to form the eyes designated. The seals I chose mold fire, but only to a degree. I don't need seals to mold chakra for low-level techniques, but for extensive fire manipulation I need to form seals for it to work. They also can simply blast fire indiscriminately, but it's not very hot or directed. My eyes also contain the entire language of seals, and can convince my brain that it appears as regular spoken language, which saves a lot of translation time," Naruto explained. Then he continued, "They also mold chakra into the form of the sense-confusing signals of genjutsu, allowing me to throw out illusions without words or seals." Gaara sat motionless through the whole explanation, processing exactly what just his companion's eyes were capable of. He shuddered slightly to think of the full scope of Naruto's abilities. "My turn," Naruto said. "Okay. Why do you wear that gourd? Your sand could easily be contained somewhere else." Gaara's answer was, "It is a symbol of my connection to the desert. I also didn't have much of a choice in the matter. Shukaku molded the sand into that shape when I was 6. Gaara then asked, "I have never seen you fight with your hands. Do you do so at all, or do you simply use nin and genjutsu?" Naruto replied, "I have my own style, that I developed specifically for me, but I know only 2 base styles. I hate how in other stories, they've got Naruto mastering 3 or 4 styles in a year. Unless you've actually trained in that style for several years, you're nowhere close to mastery. Naruto been practicing for 6 years, so he's got 2 style down but not mastered, they are Wushu and Wing Chun. I used shadow clones heavily in combination with these because they present more opportunities than fighting alone." Naruto then took his turn. "Exactly how fast are you? Because you show almost no speed whatsoever when I've seen you fight. Is your gourd simply that heavy, or do you not feel the need to move?" Gaara responded, "I've simply never had to do anything but walk, never had to dodge or block because my sand protects me in battle, though now I suppose that I should begin to make progress toward more speed, as your seal seems to have cut off my sand shield." Naruto nodded and tried to think of another question to ask, but came up blank. Gaara apparently did too, as he simply sat and stared off into space. Naruto spoke, "We should probably get a good idea of each other combat effectiveness." He motioned toward the training grounds. They both stood facing each other, then Naruto leaped high, and threw several knives from his sleeves. He followed up with a small fireball, and unsealed a metal plate about 1.5 feet in diameter. Using chakra to stabilize it in the air, he pushed off, flying several yards over Gaara's head as he deflected the knives with his sand. He can still do it manually, then sand shushined out of the way. Naruto pulled his disc to him with a wire, caught, then replaced himself with a shadow clone, and stood on the roof and threw out an area-altering genjutsu. These work by using chakra to bend the light around a specific region, resulting in confusion when objects behaved as the brain told the body how to react to false signals that the eyes received. In this case, he chose to alter the space in a 10-yard around the area his clone was about to enter. He made it so that Gaara's eyes would believe the area would look like it did before the clone entered. As it sped through the area, Gaara, oblivious to the approaching danger, simply waited. He was startled as the clone exited the illusioned area, several feet away from Gaara. The clone bent its knees slightly as if to deliver a kick, and the real Naruto wrapped his wires around Gaara's ankles and under his arms, lightly enough as not to let him feel that he was being set up. Note: Naruto's wires are normally blunt, the edges created by wind chakra, which he has a natural element but doesn't use much. The clone swung for a kick, but jumped over Gaara instead, and before Gaara could do anything else, the real Naruto hoisted him by his ankles upside down, while his clone latched onto one of the wires, and held a kunai to Gaara's neck. "You lost," Naruto stated simply. Gaara thought for a way out but was unused to being at a disadvantage. He nodded in acceptance. Naruto let him down. It's clear that you need a lot of training, so you won't be joining me on the next mission. Gaara asked what the mission was. Naruto responded, Konoha is in need of a new Hokage, and there are only a few candidates to fill the position. One is Jiraiya, another Tsunade, and the last would be Hyuga Heihachi. Since there has never been a clan head as Hokage, and Jiraiya is too eccentric, the Slug Princess is the most likely person. I will hunt her down, and either convince her to join us or not join them, or kill her to prevent the Leaf from gaining more powerful shinobi. Gaara understood this line of reasoning, but was disappointed that he would have a chance to fight a Sannin. Naruto noticed the look on Gaara's face, and summarizing that Gaara was disappointed he said, Don't worry, you will have a chance to fight Jiraiya when the time comes to take down the village. Hearing this, Gaara brightened, and followed Naruto back into the house and toward the library. Naruto walked inside and started picking scrolls off the shelves seemingly at random. He spoke as he walked, as you have no basic, and rely almost completely on your sand, you will study basic ninjutsu, muscle building activities, and standard taijutsu. He tossed several scrolls to Gaara. He caught them and asked, Why must I study these things if I, as you said, have my sand to rely on? Naruto snorted, because, do you think I am the only seal master on the planet? There will be others that can neutralize your control over sand, so you must learn to use other arts as well. Gaara understood, and signified this with the universal OK sign. He then asked, What are the specifics of what I will be training in? Naruto, glad he had made his point, spoke, Standard taijutsu will get you used to extending your arms and legs for punches and kicks. It will also build flexibility, so then we can find a style suited to you. Basic ninjutsu will get you used to moving chakra outside your sand, and build your chakra reserve. The muscle building is self-explanatory. Right now you are weaker than almost any genin, so we fix this so you can use your body as a weapon. Naruto pulled out another scroll and added it to the mounting pile in Gaara's arms. You will also learn to use standard ninja weapons, so you can have more tactical capabilities in battle. He exited the library and headed back toward the training area. I will leave for the city Tsunade was last seen in 4 hours, any questions? Gaara shook his head, and Naruto walked away, leaving Gaara to his training. He headed toward his armory, where he proceeded to refresh his supply of tags and poison. He finished his restock and pulled out a scroll. He had another reason for going after Tsunade. He needed her medical knowledge to finish his research on his healing factor. He couldn't use it as a viable weapon in battle until he could keep his cells from aging like crazy. 4 hours later, Naruto adjusted his cloak, ran his hand through his hair, replaced his hat, and left his safe house, with a 2 days' supply of food, and his newly restocked arms supplies. Same time, Konoha Council Chambers. If one were to look into the council chambers on any given day, they would most likely find an orderly group of stuffed shirt elders. On this day, however, an uproar of the kind not seen in that room since the Uchiha massacre occurred. The subject of said uproar was none other than Konoha's former demon container Uzumaki Naruto. Most of them wanted the demon child dead for setting foot on Fire Country soil. Though a fourth of them wanted to leave him alone for helping the Hokage against Orochimaru. The demon has to die, shouted one eloquent council member. More shouts rang out in agreement. This continued until the elders of the council quieted the crowd of people. They spoke, We understand your hatred, we know the demon needs to die, but this is a governing noble council and will not be run with such barbaric manners. Now we will vote. All who want to leave Uzumaki alone. Several hands went up, but nowhere near close to half. And all in favor of sending hunter squads. Almost every other hand went up. The elders nodded in agreement. They motioned to an Anbu in the corner. The faceless ninja walked over. The male alder spoke, Dispatch hunter squads A, B, and C. The ninja nodded. We will upgrade Uzumaki's status to sulfur monosulfide rank, the female elder spoke. Everyone on the council agreed, and another Anbu was dispatched. Now on to our next item. The village is officially Hokage-less, and as Jiraiya has refused, we are left with Tsunade, which we have assigned Jiraiya, Hitaki Kakashi, and Uchiha Sasuke. To retrieve her, we hope that an Uchiha will be able to persuade her to return. Any questions? They shook their heads no. Dismissed. Same time, Whirlpool Country. Mother, came the shouted of one teenage boy. You must see the news, Kam-e, the voice of another boy, who looked exactly the same as the first. What is children, was the voice of Uzumaki Kushina. Our brother has been to Konoha. One began, for the Chunin exams, the next pick up for him. As you know, the invasion occurred at this time, and he fought with the third Hokage against Orochimaru, they stated in unison. And now the Leaf has no Hokage, so they have elected to find Tsunade and make her the fifth. And our brother will surely be after her as well to prevent Konoha from gaining a powerful. Kushina began to smirk. If she knew where her monster of a son was, she could get there in time to kill him before he got away. She spoke, gather your sisters, we move in 2 hours, to finally destroy that damnable demon. Same time, unknown cave. 9 figures stood on the fingers of a massive statue with 9 eyes. All the figures were wrapped in black cloaks with red clouds that had a stiff collar that rose to conceal the bottom half of their faces. One figure was speaking to the other 8. The 9 Tails vessel is becoming too strong. He poses a threat to our organization, so I am assigning Itachi and Kisame to hunt him down immediately, the leader said, his ripple-patterned eyes flashing slightly in anger. He must be brought back and kept in stasis until we can seal him, then we can be done with him. One of the other members, just a projection, spoke, we have received word that Konoha plans to find Tsunade of the Sannin and elect her the 5th Hokage. There is a good chance he will be there. The member with red eyes nodded and motioned to a larger figure. We move immediately, were his only words. Same time, Orochimaru's hideout. A pain-filled yell ripped through the base that served as Orochimaru's current hideout. Kabuto rushed into the room where his master rested in time to see him rip apart another grunt. He sighed. Sometimes working for Orochimaru was incredibly difficult. Kabuto, Orochimaru called weakly. The Sannin was in pathetic shape. A good % of his flesh was charred beyond repair. The fire was actually hot enough that, according to Kabuto, his vitals had been cooked to the point where a normal person would have been dead, and he would have been if he hadn't shed his skin. Yes, Orochimaru-sama, Kabuto replied. Is there no cure for this pain? Kabuto shook his head in a negative. I've given you the strongest pain medicine I can produce. Orochimaru made a hissing noise. Then we must seek alternate means of treatment. My old teammate should be able to provide a cure. Call my Black Wielder squad, we leave at once. 2 days later, Naruto sped through the forest toward the village he had received information about. Tsunade was said to be gambling there, and he knew others had the same info he did. He watched the village itself for ninja activity, and he was right to do so, because as he reached the gates, a massive snake reared its head, and brought it crashing down onto the castle at the center of the town. Crap, Naruto said, as he had hoped Orochimaru wouldn't be here. He pulled out a 3-pronged kunai, and threw it straight up. He teleported up 50 feet, then used a shadow clone to launch himself higher. He then used another clone to launch toward the snake itself. He made 8 seals and mumbled to himself, fire style, burning meteor. The air around him began to heat up until it caught fire. Orochimaru looked over from his position in a wheelchair. He was the burning object that was Naruto and rolled himself off his snake before Naruto made contact, dispelling the summon. Naruto landed several yards from Orochimaru and Kabuto, who had just appeared behind his master. Orochimaru groaned out, "Foolish boy, you should not have come here." Kabuto snapped, and instantly a group of warriors Naruto recognized appeared. It's them, he thought. The ninja from the day his master was murdered were back, still clad in their black cloaks. Bet you thought I forgot about them, didn't you? Them, Naruto spoke. You will pay for this, Orochimaru, and your lackeys will join you in hell. The last word of the sentence came from behind one of the black-clad servants. They were lined up in a straight line next to the Lord, and Naruto had appeared behind the middle 2 of the 8. He struck both of them in the back, and both their chests exploded in a shower of gore. He pivoted on one foot to face the 3 furthest from Orochimaru, and fired of 2 medium, think compact car, fireballs, and then 2 arcs of lightning to the left and right. One of the assassins jumped up and so escaped the blast, but the others weren't so lucky. One dodged left and got fried, the other didn't move at all and was cooked well done. Naruto swung around to look for the last 4, but discovered Orochimaru and his cronies had disappeared. The only people left were him, and a shocked-looking Tsunade and Shizune. Then they snapped out of their daze and looked at Naruto. "Who the hell are you?" were the first words out of the slug princess's mouth. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto said. You mean the Uzumaki Naruto S-rank criminal? Shizune asked. Naruto got a little frustrated at this. How many other Uzumakis were there? No, other Uzumaki Naruto happy farmer of goats. Naruto shot back sarcastically. Tsunade then noticed a letter on the ground in front of her. She picked it up and read. Tsunade Heim. That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.